Chapter 1. Hey, little Jiang is back. What delicious food did you buy? As soon as Jiang Hai walked into the community, several aunties who were basking in the sun next to him said loudly to him. At this time, Jiang Hai, who was carrying things, heard the words of several aunties and nodded to them with a chuckle. I went to the river to catch fish. Showing his harvest today, Jiang Hai said to the aunties. Little Jiang, what auntie told you last time, did you tell your wife? Does she have any thoughts? Looking at Jiang Hai in front of her, one of the aunties walked over slowly and carefully said to Jiang Hai. I told her, she said she would think about it, but she didn't give me a clear answer. Hearing the auntie's words, Jiang Hai's face flashed a trace of embarrassment, but he still said it. Hey, these rich people, they are so troublesome, but no matter how troublesome they are still rich, right? Hee hee. Patting Jiang Hai's arm, the auntie said with a chuckle. In the laughter of the auntie, Jiang Hai smiled awkwardly and then returned to his home. The moment he opened the door with the key, Jiang Hai, who had a smile on his face, withdrew the fake smile on his face and sighed. Looking at the empty house with 5 bedrooms and 3 living rooms in front of him, he smiled helplessly, carried the bucket and walked to the kitchen. When he passed by the living room, there were 3 small wedding photos there. The 2 people in the photos, the man was handsome, and the woman was also very beautiful. Although it was a wedding photo, there was no smile on the woman's face. Whenever Jiang Hai saw this frosty face, he would have a headache. This kind of life was not what he wanted. What's the use of thinking so much? Recently, I have finally finished my work. I have to find a way to find a job to make money. When I pay off the money I owe her, I can apply for divorce. With a self-deprecating smile, Jiang Hai said slowly. Then he regained his courage, walked into the kitchen, picked up the knife and scissors that had been prepared, and prepared to start cleaning the fish. Jiang Hai, born in 1988, 27 years old this year, was born in Bingcheng, the capital city of the northernmost province in Huaxia. Speaking of his life, it could be said that there was some excitement in the ordinary life. To be exact, before the age of 26, he was ordinary, just like most people. After he was born, he was a naughty child. Because there was only one child in every family, his family spoiled him. His father and mother were ordinary employees of a state-owned enterprise. Although they were not very rich, at least they did not have to worry about their lives. Then he went to primary school, junior high school, and high school. After graduating from high school, because his academic performance was very poor, he casually went to a diploma mill university. He majored in the legendary all-purpose department, financial management. In the 4 years of university, except for the first year, the number of classes in the other 3 years added up to about 30 classes. He spent more time in the dormitory watching cartoons or playing games in the internet cafe. There was no other way, the school's network was too weak. Fortunately, it was a diploma mill university. During the exam, he could pass it directly with 200 yuan per subject, which saved him a lot of brain cells. When he graduated from university at the age of 23, his family arranged for him to work in a trading company. His daily life was very simple, very ordinary, and fulfilling. But everything changed when he was 26 years old, in the 3rd year of his work. First, his father died in an accident. Then, his mother could not bear such a blow and fell ill in the hospital. After his girlfriend knew about his family's situation, she decisively broke up with him and ran away with a department manager in the company. Because of this relationship, Jiang Hai also resigned from the position in the company that he had worked hard for 3 years. In order to treat his mother's illness, he sold the house and the family, but the money for the operation was still not enough. At the most critical moment, his current wife appeared and lent him 400,000 yuan to help his mother finish the operation. The condition was that he had to marry her. The operation was completed, and it was very successful. But unfortunately, his mother did not have any will to live. A year after the operation, she passed away. It was only last month. The death of his parents made Jiang Hai very sad. But after the sadness, he still had to live. In this world, there was no one else. The earth had to rotate. This was also an unchanging truth. But if he wanted to start over, Jiang Hai had to find a way to pay back the money he owed. Speaking of his wife, she was not an ordinary person. His wife was called Qi Li. They were childhood friends. They grew up together. Both of their parents worked in the same factory. But his current father-in-law went into business in 1992. There were good times and bad times. In 2000, he was considered successful in business. Then, he brought his daughter and wife to live in the capital. Since then, the two families had gradually broken off contact. Other than the occasional phone call during the New Year and other festivals, there was almost no contact between the two families. Today, the Qi family's company had a market value of several billion yuan. Although not all of it belonged to the Qi family, it was almost the same. Qi Li had grown up to be graceful and elegant. Compared to those movie stars, she was definitely not worse or even better. She graduated from a famous university in the United States. She could be said to be the cream of the crop. She might have only made one mistake in her life. Because of this mistake, she married Jiang Hai. In fact, this news was found out by Jiang Hai. With his current status, Qi Li probably would not tell him the truth. This story was similar to the 8 o'clock TV dramas about the feuds of the rich. When Qi Li was in school, she had a boyfriend. But when she returned to China, she found out that her boyfriend was actually Shao Kai of her family's rival company. Then, the two fell in love with each other. One day, Qi Li inadvertently revealed news about her family's investment. In the end, this proposal caused Qi Li's family's company to lose more than 1 billion yuan. The company's assets almost instantly shrank by half. Qi Li's father died of a heart attack after hearing the news. At this point, the two who were originally in love became enemies. Qi Li wanted to take over her father's company, but the company's founding members would not agree to let her do so. In their eyes, a woman was a woman. Her father died because of that man. Who could guarantee that this woman would not directly lose the company? In order to take over the company, in order to have a reputation, her mother thought of a way to get married. It could also be said to be a fake marriage. After getting married, it could be said that she had completely cut off all ties with Shao Kai. And Jiang Hai was the existence of that fake marriage. Ever since they got married, Qi Li actually only stayed here for one night. The two slept in separate rooms. The next day, she left home and took over the company. After a year of development, she had already stabilized the company. But Jiang Hai had completely lost his original vision for this relationship. Now, his only thought was to quickly make money and pay off the money he owed her. Then, he could start afresh. This was his only goal now. Hiss. Facts had proven that sometimes, when doing something, one cannot be half-hearted. For example, when cleaning up the fish, Jiang Hai had fished by the river. Anyone who had fished by the river before would know that all the fish by the river were small wild fish. There were no big fish. There were only two kinds of fish caught by the river in Bing City. One was small carp seeds, which was also known as crucian carp. The other was white banknotes, also known as white strips. It tasted good, but it was very small. This kind of fish did not even have scales removed. Some people would directly eat it with its internal organs. But Jiang Hai preferred to squeeze out the internal organs to eat. Now, he had an accident while squeezing out the internal organs. In the internal organs of this fish, there was a small white ball. He did not know what this small ball was made of, but it was very prickly. When he was not paying attention, Jiang Hai's hand was pricked by the small ball, and it was bleeding. Damn, I really fell. Looking at his bleeding hand, Jiang Hai subconsciously cursed. At the same time, he used his hand to pick up the small ball. He wanted to see what this small ball was, but unfortunately, before he could finish looking, the small ball shook and disappeared. As for Jiang Hai, before he could finish his last word, he had already rolled his eyes and fainted directly on the ground. The moment he fainted, the wound on his hand slowly disappeared at this time. A small white light rose from Jiang Hai's body. If he was still awake at this time, it would not be difficult to recognize that this white light was the small ball he was holding just now. The small ball kept rising in the air. Along with a series of cracking sounds, the small ball was like an egg. It shattered from the inside. With a soft sound, a white, earthworm-like creature ran out of the eggshell. After coming out, it did not wander around elsewhere. Instead, it plunged directly into Jiang Hai's body. As Jiang Hai's body shook, a large snake tattoo slowly appeared on his body. At this time, Jiang Hai's consciousness was also experiencing a very magical scene. At this time, he felt as if he had become a dragon. A very big, very magical dragon. This dragon's power was overwhelming. Its strength was so strong that it made people's hair stand on end. Most importantly, this dragon was the common master of all dragons. He led them and became enemies with the legendary phoenixes and Qilins. They fought every day and that side of the world would never have peace. Finally, the war exhausted the potential of the three races. At this time, a few people dressed as Taoist priests appeared in front of him. They recounted his crimes and tried to subdue him. He tried in vain to resist, but unfortunately, the leader of the Taoist priests was too strong. After he was restrained, he was pressed under a mountain. After an unknown number of years, he felt his strength getting weaker and weaker. His vitality was dwindling. In the end, he died. Only a trace of his essence was left. It seeped into the underground water and left the cave. The essence was none other than that small ball of light. It had drifted outside for an unknown number of years before Jiang Hai obtained it today. When Jiang Hai woke up again, it was already the next day. The fish that had been placed there all this time had started to smell a little. However, he was not in the mood to care about the fish. Instead, he stared blankly at the tattoo on his body. Could it be that everything in the dream was real? Chapter 2. Whoosh. As the car brake screeched to a stop, 3 people got out of the car. The one walking in front was a woman. She was about 1.7 meters tall and was wearing a woman's suit. Although there was no brand logo on the suit, anyone who knew the business could tell that it was not an ordinary suit. There were 2 people walking beside her. One of them was a foreign woman in her 30s. She wore a pair of sunglasses and looked very capable. Her eyes constantly scanned the crowd behind her inkstone sunglasses. The other person was wearing the same office lady's outfit. She was carrying 2 handbags and had a pair of glasses on her delicate face. She walked very quickly. "Do you have any plans for tonight?" the woman walking in front asked the person beside her as she walked. "Most of today's work is done. Boss Lou of Glory World wants to treat you to dinner tonight. He probably wants to talk about the construction of Shifang. Also, your mother left a message. She said that the day after tomorrow is the anniversary of your father's death. She wants to know when you will be going back." When she heard the woman's words, the woman wearing glasses immediately looked at the schedule and said to her. When she heard the news, the woman couldn't help but slow down her pace. Then, she picked up her pace again. "Tell Lu Jingri that I don't have time to have dinner with him tonight. I will give him 15 minutes to convince me. Otherwise, I will not give him the construction of Shifang. Also, tell my mother that I will definitely have time the day after tomorrow. As for the specific time, I will have to discuss it with Jiang Hai," the woman said coldly as she glanced at the woman beside her. Yes, this woman was none other than Jiang Hai's rumored wife, Qi Li. She was a famous young entrepreneur in the country. She was young, beautiful, and capable. However, there was no negative news about her. It had been a year since she took over the family business. She had used 3 months to prove her ability and stabilize the company, which had been in turmoil. In the remaining 9 months, she had made up for 1/3 of her mistakes. This also made the board of directors swallow their words for the time being. After all, these people were businessmen. Since their old friend's daughter could continue to make money for them, there was no need for them to exchange the company for money. So for now, the company was still considered peaceful. In fact, it was getting quieter. Yes. Hearing the woman mention Jiang Hai, a trace of disdain and hesitation flashed across the assistant's eyes. However, it was soon suppressed. In her opinion, President Qi had always been favored by God. How could that Jiang Hai make President Qi marry him? Therefore, she had always looked down on Jiang Hai. Even when Jiang Hai called President Qi yesterday, she did not tell him. President Qi. Just as Qi followed the three people into the building, a girl at the front desk suddenly stood up and called out to Qi. Hearing her words, Qi couldn't help but slow down and look at her with some confusion. President Qi, a man named Jiang Hai called you yesterday. He said that it was your. The receptionist looked at Qi and said hesitantly. Normally, they shouldn't tell President Qi about this. However, if they didn't report it, it would be their responsibility if something happened. Husband? If you have something to say, just say it. Hearing the girl's words, Qi said indifferently. Well, yes, he said that he had something to tell you, but he couldn't contact you. He left something in your house. If you go back at any time, you can go and take a look. After hesitating for a moment, the receptionist said in a low voice. Oh, I see. Hearing what the receptionist said, Qi frowned and continued to walk forward. When the three people walked into the elevator, Qi glanced at the woman with glasses next to her. Jiang Hai called me? Looking back, Qi asked indifferently. Yes, he said that he had something to do and had to go out for a while. He didn't say the details. He just hoped that you could call him back when you are free. Hearing Qi words, the woman with glasses said with a guilty conscience. This is the first and last time. As my assistant, you can't bring your emotions to work. No matter what Jiang Hai is, he is my husband. This is recognized by the law. He is not someone who can be looked down upon. Do you understand? The cold voice with a trace of coldness made the woman with glasses next to her shrink her neck subconsciously. Understood. Hearing her words, Qi didn't say much. When the elevator arrived, she walked down immediately. Returning to her office, she took a sip of the coffee that the secretary had just poured. She then took out a mobile phone from her bag. After hesitating for a moment, she dialed the number on the screen. Since the marriage, this Jiang Hai has called her a total of 4 times. This should be the 5th time. She really doesn't know why this person is looking for her. Sorry, the number you dialed is not in the service area, please try again later. But unfortunately, as the phone was unplugged, a voice came from the receiver, which made Qi frown. This guy, what did he do? Looking at the number on the screen, Qi whispered. Achoo, what the hell, my human limit body is about to collapse, are you kidding me? At this time, somewhere in Blue Sea Province, Jiang Hai couldn't help but sneeze, pinched his nose, and said with some dissatisfaction. It seems that the destination should not be far away. I hope that the memory of that dead dragon is not wrong. Jiang Hai said in a low voice as he tightened his clothes and shook his backpack. Then, he continued to walk forward with his head lowered. Today was the 10th day after Jiang Hai killed the fish. Since the day he killed the fish, he knew what he got. Dragon balls. Of course, it wasn't the dragon balls that can fulfill one's wish by collecting 7 of them. It was the essence of a real dragon, and the owner of this dragon ball was not an ordinary canon, but a big boss-level existence in a prehistoric novel. According to legend, after Pangu opened the sky, there were a total of 3 super races in the world. The sky was dominated by the phoenix, the sea was dominated by the dragon, and the land was dominated by the Qilin. In order to compete for the territory and resources in the world, the dragon, phoenix, and Qilin races fought. It was also the legendary first tribulation of the dragon Han. When the 3 races were victorious, even those sages-to-be did not dare to confront them. It could be said that in those years, the three races were the masters of the world, and the master of the dragon race was called the ancestral dragon. At the end of the first tribulation of the dragon Han, he was suppressed by the heavenly Lord Yuanshi and sent to the foot of Kunlun Mountain, where he was suppressed until his death. Later, the untainted land was shattered, and 99% of the fragments formed the legendary Earth Immortal Realm, which was the four major states. However, some fragments were swept into the void, and the cave of the ancestral dragon, which was no longer inhabited, was also swept into here. It fell under Kunlun on Earth. There was no immortal power on Earth, nor true essence. It was impossible to cultivate immortality, let alone cultivate spirit. So here, the Dragon Ball gradually became smaller. Finally, it was small enough that it could be taken away by the undercurrent of the cave. It rushed out of the cave, and somehow, it was swallowed by a fish. Finally, it was obtained by Jiang Hai. The Dragon Ball that Jiang Hai obtained was the Dragon Ball of the ancestral dragon, but it was weakened countless times. If he was in the Earth Immortal Realm or the Immortal Realm, with this Dragon Ball, he could achieve great things, even if he did not become a real dragon. But on Earth, this was just a simple power amplifier, at least in Jiang Hai's eyes. With this Dragon Ball, the tattoo of a big snake automatically appeared on his body, but there were not many scales on the snake. According to the feedback of the Dragon Ball, this was the initial form of a dragon. As long as Jiang Hai absorbed the chi of life between heaven and earth, that is, found a place with a good environment, and absorbed the vitality of the earth, trees, sea, and creatures. The more he absorbed, the more he would grow. The less he absorbed, the less he would grow. When the scales on the snake's body were full, he would evolve. Of course, he was not just an ordinary laborer. The evolution of the tattoo was also good for him. For example, the tattoo of the big snake could give him the top physical fitness of human beings in an instant. He had tried it these days. Although his muscles were not too exaggerated, they were full of tendons and 8-pack abs. The strength of the bench press was as high as 220 kilograms, and the speed of the 100-meter dash was more than 9 seconds. Moreover, his physical strength was very strong. With the treadmill running at 10 kilometers per hour, he ran for 3 hours before sweating, and ran for 8 hours before feeling tired. Such an abnormal physical fitness was enough to surprise him. But this wasn't all. The most delightful thing was that as the overlord of the great desolate world sea, Jiang Hai could now breathe underwater and ignore the water pressure. His swimming speed was almost the same as on land. This was why he was so confident in coming here. However, compared with the third mutation, these two things were a bit too childish. His third ability was somewhat unscientific. As a dragon, every part of his body was a treasure. His sweat, his saliva, and his excrement all had the ability to speed up the growth of plants and animals, and even evolve them. However, the most obvious was his blood. He had once experimented with a drop of his blood on a flower seed, and the flower would grow overnight. Moreover, it would bloom exceptionally beautifully. However, although the effect was good, it was not without sacrifice. Every time he used a drop of blood, 3 of the scale tattoos on his body would disappear. It would take at least 5 days to integrate one scale in the place where he lived, which was what made him most excited. This was just a snake, and the effect was so strong. If it evolved, the effect would be even stronger. And the first 2 abilities would be improved as a result. For Jiang Hai, if he did not use such a golden finger, he would really be punished by God. Chapter 3. This golden finger was indeed useful, but there was a problem. If he wanted to collect the scales, he needed to find a place with beautiful scenery and little pollution. However, the problem now was that there were many beautiful places in the country, and some undeveloped places were also less polluted. However, these places were either inconvenient or too dangerous. With Jiang Hai's current level, he did not want to be a savage, and he also did not want to be involved in some strange disputes. Therefore, after thinking for a long time and recalling the novels he had read before, it seemed that buying a piece of land overseas was a good choice. Now, the problem was that he could go overseas, but where would he get the money? Flowers that were watered with dragon blood were very valuable. The pot of flowers that he used as an experiment was bought by a boss in the south for 300,000 yuan. However, 3 dragon scales could only be exchanged for 1 pot. If he wanted to sell it overseas, he would need at least tens of millions. 30 million yuan would be 100 pots. He would have to wait for 2 years. Would he still be able to level up? He did not have the patience. Fortunately, Jiang Hai still remembered the last memory of the Dragon Ball very clearly. There were many treasures in the cave where the ancestral dragon was imprisoned. Those sparkling toys seemed to be quite valuable. Therefore, he gritted his teeth and sold 2 pots of flowers, earning 600,000 yuan. He left 400,000 yuan for his wife in the room. This was his loan from back then, and he also applied for the divorce agreement from the court. After signing it and putting it on the paper, he called Qi Li, but unfortunately, he did not hear Qi Li's voice. However, thinking that they would be strangers from now on, he had nothing to say. He got on the plane to Blue Ocean Province. After arriving at Blue Ocean, according to the location in his mind, he basically determined the location of the ancestral dragon's cave. If there were no accidents, it would be one of the legendary dangerous places in Huaxia, Hell's Gate. Hell's Gate, also known as Death Valley, was located in the Kunlun Mountains at the junction of Qinghai and Tibet. There was plenty of grass and water here. Although it could not be compared to Inner Mongolia, it was undoubtedly the best place to graze. However, these herders would rather let their cattle and sheep starve to death in the Gobi Desert than take half a step here. Because it was really evil here. In the past, many people had never come out after entering this place. The country had also conducted scientific examinations on this place. The first was that there were a large number of magnetic fields underground. These magnetic fields would paralyze all technology. Not to mention cell phones, even satellites would not work here. Even compasses would be circled. The second was that these magnetic fields would trigger the electric charges in the clouds, causing electric charges to discharge. There were no trees or tall objects here. People walking here would be the best lightning rod. It was very likely that a cloud would suddenly float over and lightning would strike a passerby. It was really terrifying. In addition to these 2 points, the third most frightening point was that this place was full of swamps and underground rivers. As long as one fell in, no matter if it was a human or an animal, it would be difficult to escape death. It could be said that this place was a natural life forbidden zone. If it weren't for the fact that Jiang Hai could now breathe freely underwater, he wouldn't have dared to come here. When he came here, not to mention a guide, even if he wanted to rent a car, when people heard that he was going to Hell's Gate, they wouldn't even rent him a car. Therefore, he could only walk slowly. With the physical strength of a human, after walking for 2 days, he finally arrived at Hell's Gate. He looked at the stone tablet in front of him that warned passers-by. If he walked past here, he would be in the territory of Death Valley. Jiang Hai walked for about 5 kilometers. He looked at the sky and then looked at the watch on his hand. Huaxia was really too big. It only used a common time, which caused the time zone to be unstable. In the summer in the east, the sky would be bright at 3:00 in the morning and dark at 7:00 in the evening. In the west, the sky would only be bright at 7:00 in the morning and light could still be seen at 9:00 in the evening. This was the difference between the 2 sides. Looking at the watch on his hand, it was only 5:00. At this time, it was still as bright as day here. However, the sky should be a little dark in Bingcheng. According to Jiang Hai's schedule, he should find a place to rest at this time. Holding the hiking stick, he slowly moved forward and found a piece of land that was still relatively dry. First, he pulled out the grass and scattered a circle of insect repellent around it. This thing was quite useful. At least he was not bitten by insects these days. Then, he started to set up his simple tent. When everything was done, it was already 8 o'clock in the evening. Then, he used a flint to light a fire. Along the way, he had collected a lot of dry firewood. Jiang Hai sat in front of the fire. He took out compressed biscuits and beef jerky from his backpack, boiled a small amount of water, and prepared to soak everything in it. Although the taste was very ordinary, he did not have the leisure to care about it now. After boiling the water, he ate the biscuits and beef soup. Although his physical fitness was very good now, don't forget that people need food and calories. This was indispensable. After finishing the food, Jiang Hai deliberately took out some small sticks from the grass in the distance. He tied them with a string and hung a bell on the string. This was also the method that the local herdsmen taught him when they knew that he was coming here. Hell's Gate, Death Valley. It was indeed a land of death, but it was not completely without creatures that could survive here. Especially after a large number of vegetarian animals were struck to death by lightning, there would be a lot of charred corpses left on the ground. These corpses were the best food for the wolves in Kunlun Mountain. Therefore, he had to guard against these guys when he came here. Walking into the tent, Jiang Hai directly got into the sleeping bag. He specially bought a machete locally and placed it beside him. In fact, the local herdsman did not say one thing. Not only did he have to guard against wolves here, but he also had to guard against people. However, although Jiang Hai did not have much experience before, he was not stupid. It was okay to go out in some big cities, but in remote places, it was inevitable to guard against people. He was not a good person, and he did not have such naive thoughts. Fortunately, after a quiet night, when the sun rose the next day, he walked out of the tent and boiled some water to wash his face and brush his teeth. Then, he walked deeper into the forest. After walking for about another 2 days, Jiang Hai came to the place recorded in the Dragon Ball in his memory. At this time, in front of him, he could see that it was a large swamp. No one knew how deep this swamp was, but it could be predicted that this place was definitely not as calm as it looked on the surface. Phew! Let's fight. Jiang Hai took a deep breath. Although he was a little uncertain in his heart now, he was still prepared to fight with his ability to breathe underwater. He still understood the principle of seeking riches in danger. After giving himself a boost, Jiang Hai took out the equipment he specially prepared. In fact, it was a filtering equipment. Although he could breathe in water, he could not breathe in mud. He needed to separate the water in the mud. He nailed a rope to the ground again, put on the ventilator, carried his backpack, and jumped into the swamp. The moment he entered the swamp, he felt that his body was under his control and began to sink quickly. Swamps are the same as water. When you fall into water, you will sink quickly, but don't forget that water is buoyant. Moreover, human hands and legs can paddle and swim in the water. However, swamps are different. There is mud inside. In terms of buoyancy, it is stronger than water. But the problem is that you can't paddle here. As soon as your feet touch the ground, the mud that surged from all directions will instantly imprison your feet. No matter how strong a person is, there is no way to escape from the swamp by themselves. Even Jiang Hai, whose physical strength has reached the limit of a human, is the same. Fortunately, he was already mentally prepared and did not care too much. He just hugged the filter on his face and used his body weight to bring him down into the swamp. Feeling the mud gradually cover his face, Jiang Hai took one last look at the blue sky. Then, he exerted his strength and his body sank. When the muddy water was brought in front of him by the filtering equipment, Jiang Hai tried it. The filtering equipment, which cost him more than 20,000 yuan, was very good. Basically, what was in front of him was clear water. Occasionally, there would be a few grains of sand. This also made him relax a little. As the water continued to flow in, he also felt that his body was being pulled deeper into the swamp by gravity. No one knows how deep the swamp is. The underground river under the swamp is Jiang Hai's goal. After about 3 hours, Jiang Hai felt that the mud around him was getting thinner and thinner. He knew that he was about to reach the underground river. Sure enough, after less than an hour, Jiang Hai felt that he was sinking into a pool of water as his body suddenly sped up. Letting his body sink for a while, Jiang Hai opened his eyes. Sure enough, at this time, what was in front of him was no longer mud, but water. It was very clear water, but unfortunately, there was not even a little bit of light here. He could not see anything. He untied the rope. Jiang Hai took out the waterproof flashlight he had already prepared from his pocket. As the light turned on, a special underwater world appeared in front of him. Because generally speaking, as long as there is water, even if it is at the bottom of the sea, there will be fish. But there might be fish here, but Jiang Hai didn't see any. At a glance, he only saw that the bed of the underground river below him was covered with all kinds of bones. There were animal bones, human bones, and only some earthworm-like insects were drilling in and out of it. He suddenly lost interest in looking down. Following the direction of the dragon ball, he swam forward. Oh, 28 collections. That's very surprising. After all, Little Fei did not advertise or notify anyone. He was a little timid and happy. Chapter 4. Puff. With a sound, Jiang Hai's head emerged from a pool. He shone the flashlight in his hand into the empty crypt in front of him. Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. He had arrived. He rolled and crawled to the shore. Even with Jiang Hai's physical strength, he couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. He took out the watch he specially prepared and looked at it. From the time he went down to the swamp to the time he swam out, a total of 8 hours had passed. According to his estimation, he swam for about 4 hours. The underground river here was really long. When he went back, it would probably take even longer. After all, he sank when he came down, and when he went back, he had to use his arms to pull himself back up. The premise was that the rope couldn't be untied by others. After resting here for less than half an hour, Jiang Hai stood up again and looked at the cave. According to Long Zhu, there were a few cracks at the top of the cave that were ventilation openings. However, don't think that just because it was ventilation, people could pass through. The ventilation openings were only the size of a fingernail. It was unknown how many meters away from the ground. It was impossible to get out from there. Putting down his backpack, Jiang Hai took the flashlight and walked into the cave behind him. Originally, the cave was pitch black, but when the flashlight shone down, there were countless refracted lights coming from all directions, illuminating the place as if it was daytime. It was so bright that Jiang Hai's eyes couldn't bear it. After he adapted to the light here, he couldn't help but laugh. He was really happy. I'm rich this time. Looking at the countless gems in front of him, shining with an inexplicable brilliance, Jiang Hai was about to go crazy with laughter. Long Zhu didn't lie to him. There really were treasures. At this time, there were countless gems piled up in front of him. These gems were basically hexagonal. Purple, red, pink, yellow, and green were piled up here like a small mountain. At the top of this hill, there was a large skeleton. If Jiang Hai didn't guess wrong, then it might be the legendary ancestral dragon. However, at this time, the ancestral dragon's corpse had already been weathered for who knows how many years. Not much was left of it. A dragon bone could be vaguely seen, and there were 2 small dragon horns on the head. As an ant, you have to have the life of an ant. Look at you, you fought for a long time and died here. Look at me, I'm an ant. I admit it. First, I don't fight for power, and second, I don't fight for profits. After going out, a good life is better than anything else. Looking at the dragon bone in front of him, Jiang Hai laughed self-deprecatingly. He didn't have any other thoughts. It was not an exaggeration to describe him as an unambitious person. He didn't think his life's tough. Let's not talk about it anymore. Let's see how much these things are worth first. With the flashlight. Damn. It's so transparent. It's like glass. Could it be a diamond? I'm really. Crack. Seeing this gem, Jiang Hai's face showed a smile. If it was really a diamond, then he would be rich. Just as he was thinking about it, he used a little force in his hand and heard a crack. The diamond in his hand was crushed by him. Damn! Is it really glass? Looking at the broken diamond on the ground, Jiang Hai was dumbfounded. No matter how bad his studies were, he still knew that diamonds were the hardest natural substance in the world. If one wanted to process diamonds, they had to use machines. Right now, he was only at the limit of a human's strength. When would a human be able to crush diamonds? Looking at the diamond broken into pieces in his hand, Jiang Hai was completely confused. In fact, there was nothing wrong with it. It was indeed glass, but glass was also a very valuable gem in the untainted world. After all, no one had a way to artificially refine glass. It was formed naturally after the war. The production of naturally formed glass was even lower. Naturally, it was valuable. Just like in the ancient Huaxia, although there was already glass refining, the ancient people still treated glass as a treasure when the Westerners brought it over. But this was not the ancient times after all. How much can this be sold for? Damn! Are you kidding me? Jiang Hai threw the broken glass in his hand far away. Are you kidding me? I worked so hard to find treasures, and in the end, I got a mountain of glass. Damn! Thinking of this, Jiang Hai was also inexplicably angry. Originally, he was hoping to buy a piece of land overseas after finding the treasure and steadily improve his cultivation. Although he was not ambitious, living a better life was also his goal. But now, it seemed like everything had to be postponed. He reckoned that he would have to go back and slowly start from planting flowers. Thinking of this, he was infuriated. Without another word, he lifted his leg and kicked at the gem mountain in front of him. With one kick, the glass objects were all broken into pieces. Then, he kicked them far away. Facts prove that sometimes, when people were angry, it was useful to vent their anger. These pieces of glass were useless to him, so he might as well smash them here and listen to them for fun. That body of strength just happened to have nowhere to vent. Immediately, the gem mountain fell at a speed visible to the naked eye. As for the ancestral Gragon's corpse, well, it had already been kicked far away by Jiang Hai. As he stepped on it, his foot suddenly slipped, and he stumbled. He stepped on it, but that thing didn't break. Oh, what kind of joke is this? This slip almost made him fall. After maintaining his balance, Jiang Hai looked at the piece he stepped on just now. In his eyes, a red, fist-sized hexagonal gem was emitting light. After looking at it, Jiang Hai stepped on it again. This time, he was very sure that this thing wasn't glass. This was because he stepped on it very carefully and didn't break it. Something that can withstand his foot shouldn't be glass. Could it be that there are other gems here? Thinking of this, Jiang Hai's eyes could not help but light up. If this was really the case, then it would be a little interesting. At that moment, he did not say anything more. He immediately squatted down and began to look at these gems one by one. His method of determining whether it was glass or not was very simple. He stepped on it, and if it broke, it would be glass. If it did not break, he would take it away. Although in this mountain of gemstones, 99% of them were made of glass, because the quantity was not small, looking at the pile of red, blue, purple, green, pink, and yellow in front of him. Even if the elimination rate was 99%, after a few hours, he was able to pick out more than 10 pieces. With motivation, Jiang Hai no longer complained. He made a new pot of beef biscuit soup. After eating a good meal, he went back to sleep. When he woke up, he continued to look for more gemstones. There was no motivation higher than picking up treasures. At least for now, Jiang Hai was like this. When Jiang Hai returned to Hell's Gate from the underground world, it was already 5 days later. When he climbed out of the quagmire using the rope, he could not help but smile. Compared to when he went in, not only was the bag not smaller, but it was also a lot bigger. It contained his harvest this time. After washing his face with water, Jiang Hai quickly embarked on his journey back. 2 days later, he exited Hell's Gate and returned to the nearest town. He had a good sleep, had a good meal, and took a hot bath. Then, he returned to the city with an airport nearby and took a plane to the capital. Although he liked his hometown, Bing City, he also knew that although Bing City was known as the provincial capital and the largest inland city in the country, Bing City's economy was not very developed. In terms of appraisals and auctions, it was indeed a little lacking. For his harvest this time, it was safer to go to the imperial capital. After arriving at the imperial capital, Jiang Hai actually felt a little emotional. Thinking that his ex-wife seemed to be here, he thought. I don't know if she signed it. Smacking his lips, Jiang Hai laughed self-deprecatingly. She did not even care about you, so why are you still thinking about it? As for whether she signed it or not, she probably signed it. After all, the person who was most tired of this marriage was not Jiang Hai, but her. Even Jiang Hai himself knew that the two of them were like toads trying to eat swan meat. If the toad knew this, how could the swan not know? I don't want to think about it anymore. She and I are just strangers. There's no need to. Shaking his head and throwing that beautiful figure out of his mind, Jiang Hai carried his bag and left the T3 terminal of the Imperial Capital Airport. After that, things were much simpler. First, he took the subway to the city center and found a hotel to stay in. Then, he used his phone to check the offices of several big auction houses in the imperial capital. As far as the auction houses were concerned, they were divided into two types, domestic and overseas. To be honest, Jiang Hai did not have the intention to go to the domestic auction house because it was uncertain who the money would be transferred to after the auction. If it was only a few 100,000 or 1 million, it might not matter. But if it was more than 10 million or even 100 million, then it would be dangerous. With his current strength, if the item was robbed, then he might make some mistakes. For example, if he killed someone or crippled someone, then it would be even more troublesome. He would not even be able to stay in the country, so there was really no need to go there. Therefore, he could only use the overseas auction house. The overseas auction house was the 3 big auction houses. The biggest one was Sotheby's, but their relationship with the domestic auction house was more subtle because they had auctioned some very sensitive cultural relics in the country. Although Jiang Hai was not Fan Qing, he was not willing to go there. The second auction house was Christie's, also known as Christie's. It was the same as Sotheby's, so it did not matter if he did not go there. Now it seemed that only the third big auction house, Phillips, was left. Chapter 5. Phillips, an auction house established in 1796, was also a century-old shop, but it only had a few hundred years of history, far behind Sotheby's and Christie's. Originally, it was not qualified to be mentioned in the same breath. In the European and American regions, it could only be regarded as a second-rate auction house. However, everything changed in 1999. In November 1999, the owner of the famous luxury brand, IO, invested £70 million to buy the auction house and merged it under the name of the world's largest luxury group, IO. Later on, it took advantage of the scandals of the previous 2 auction houses to invest a lot of money in Phillips. His main focus was not on antiques. He knew that even if he competed, he would not be able to compete with the other 2 auction houses. Therefore, his main projects were impressionist oil paintings, as well as contemporary art and furniture. Jiang Hai's main goal was this. After making a phone call in the evening and contacting the person to meet at his office the next day, Jiang Hai breathed a sigh of relief. Everything had to wait until tomorrow. Early the next morning, he carried his backpack and came to Philip's office. "Hello, how can I help you?" When he walked into the office, a receptionist asked him. "Oh, hello, I called yesterday to make an appointment. My surname is Jiang." He nodded to the girl at the front desk. "Mr. Jiang, right? Your appointment is at 9:00 in the morning. It's almost time. I'll take you to the 3rd reception room first. I'll call Manager Zhang down." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the girl nodded with a smile, then led Jiang Hai to a VIP room. After adding a cup of tea for Jiang Hai, she left again. Not long after, a man in a suit came in from outside. This man looked about 40 years old, but he looked very capable. When he saw Jiang Hai, he smiled. "Mr. Jiang, right? I'm the account manager of Philip's auction house in the capital. My surname is Zhang. How may I help you?" The middle-aged man shook hands with Jiang Hai and asked with a smile. "Well, I have a batch of gems and I want to ask you to help me identify them." While shaking hands with the man, Jiang Hai also explained his purpose. The man was not surprised to hear that he was here to identify things. After all, if they didn't come here to appraise, then they would come here to auction. And even if they came here to auction, they would appraise the items before the auction. For Jiang Hai's statement, it was normal. This is naturally possible, but our auction house is not easy to operate. If you want to appraise it, you need to charge a certain fee. Sitting on both sides of the coffee table with Jiang Hai, Manager Zhang said with a smile. "I know this, but I don't know the standard of the fee." Jiang Hai gently nodded. Before coming here, he had already inquired about the auction house's appraisal. Naturally, they would charge a fee. In fact, this was their main source of income. As for the auction house, they wouldn't open for 3 years, but once they opened, they would be able to eat for 3 years. Our auction house basically charges 2 kinds of appraisal fees. One is a 1% commission fee based on the items appraised as the appraisal fee. If it's some collectibles worth thousands or tens of thousands, you can choose this way. The second is a fixed appraisal fee, 2,000 per item. Looking at Jiang Hai, the account manager said with a smile. "If that's the case, then I choose the fixed one." After thinking for a while, although Jiang Hai did not know the value of his gems, if there was a treasure, the price would be more than 200,000 yuan. The second one was more worthwhile than the first one. He was confident in his gems. Seeing that Jiang Hai had chosen, Manager Zhang did not say much and went out to invite 2 people in. One of the 2 was a middle-aged man who seemed to be a master, and the other was a young man who was probably an apprentice who came to learn and hand over things. After the 2 came in, a brief introduction was made. Jiang Hai also took out the stones he obtained from the cave. In the cave, he obtained a total of 213 stones that could not be crushed. All of them were appraised. He did not have enough money on him, so he could only see if these stones were valuable or not. If they were not valuable, he could only sell a batch and reappraise them. He was now reluctant to use snake scales to plant flowers. He thought that these stones would be worth the price of appraisal. The 2 prepared the instruments. Jiang Hai also took out some stones and put them on the coffee table. He watched the 2 people begin to appraise them. This is a natural crystal. It is not valuable. Such a large piece is about 3,500 yuan. But soon, the man finished looking at the first gem. Hearing the man's words, Jiang Hai sighed. He also knew that crystals may have been very valuable in the past, but since they could be artificially made, the price of natural crystals has not been high. If it wasn't for the purity of his own piece, it may not even be worth 3,500. Jiang Hai sighed. "It seems that I am a little too optimistic," he whispered in his heart. At the same time, he put away the similar gems on the table first. Since they were all crystals, there was no need to appraise them. The appraiser over there did not care. After all, there were too many varieties of gems and too many laymen. There was no need to cheat such money. After appraising more than a dozen pieces in a row, they were all natural crystals. Jiang Hai was already a little helpless, but fortunately, the price of these crystals was not lower than 2,000 yuan. He earned back the appraisal fee. However, just when Jiang Hai was about to become numb, the appraiser suddenly looked at the gem in his hand. This time, he fiddled with it for almost 10 minutes before raising his head and looking at Jiang Hai. "You are in luck. This is not a natural crystal, but a natural sapphire. The size is about 10 carats. It is worth 1,200,000 yuan. Hearing the appraiser's words, Jiang Hai was stunned for a moment. This time, the appraisal fee came out. After thinking for a while, he put the confirmed crystals back into his bag. As for the remaining unconfirmed crystals, a total of 132 pieces, he took them out and piled them up at the side. Looking at the workload, the appraiser couldn't help but smile. However, he didn't say anything because this was his job. He earned commission in this aspect. Appraising a gem costs 2,000 yuan, and his commission is 1,500 yuan. Jiang Hai is also giving him more money. Maybe because of this sapphire, the appraiser looked more carefully. However, a crystal is a crystal. It can't be seen as a gem just by looking at it carefully. Among the remaining gems in Jiang Hai's collection, there are 121 pieces, all of which are natural crystals. Basically, the big ones were all natural crystals. The rest of the ones that looked like gems were all relatively small in size. In the blink of an eye, the appraiser has looked at 130 pieces. Except for 2 pieces, only 9 pieces are gems. The most valuable piece is a 37-carat ruby, estimated at 2.3 million yuan. There are 2 smaller rubies, which can be sold for about 500,000 yuan together. The remaining 3 emeralds are worth about 1.6 million yuan together. 2 sapphires are worth 400,000 yuan together, and the one that was originally appraised at the beginning is only 1.6 million yuan. The remaining 3 gems, 2 aquamarine and 1 golden green, are about 50 carats in size, which is about 10 grams. Together, they can be sold for about 1 million yuan. In other words, these gems are worth about 7 million yuan in total. Although it is far from the tens of millions or hundreds of millions that Jiang Hai expected, 7 million yuan is not bad. He comforted himself in his heart that this trip is worth it. The appraiser has almost finished appraising the gems. Among the last 2 gems, one is a natural crystal, which is worth a few thousand yuan. However, when the appraiser looked at the last one, his eyes suddenly turned green. He kept looking at the stone for about half an hour. Half an hour later, he looked at his assistant beside him and asked him to get some machines. Soon, the young man came back with many machines in his hands. Then, the appraiser began to test them one by one. After about an hour and a half, the appraiser held the gem and didn't say anything. He just sat there. Is there a problem? Seeing the appraiser like this, Jiang Hai asked curiously. There's no problem, but if nothing unexpected happens, Mr. Jiang, you might be rich. Looking at the pink hexagonal gem in his hand, which is about the size of 4 thumbnails, the appraiser's eyes lit up. Rich? I really am rich. After all, those gems are worth more than 7 million yuan. He laughed self-deprecatingly. In a sense, he really is rich. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the appraiser's eyes lit up, and he said excitedly to Jiang Hai, "No, with this gem, the value of those gems is about the same as the stones on the side of the road. I can tell you with 99% certainty that this is a pink diamond. The 4C craftsmanship is the best, and the net weight is 31.6 carats. Do you know the transaction price of this kind of diamond? The transaction price for 1 carat is 380,000 US dollars. The appraiser didn't seem to want to let the pink diamond disappear from his sight for even a second, and he said with a serious face, 380,000 US dollars, 1 carat? 36 is $12 million. Is it US dollars? Hearing the appraiser's words, Jiang Hai's head felt like it was suddenly hammered. He was a little dazed, but the appraiser didn't seem to be ready to let him go so easily. No, more than that. Your pink diamond is a complete pink diamond. A complete pink diamond of 31.6 carats. This price is at least 20 times higher. Hiss. I'm a little dazed. Wait, don't talk to me. I need to be alone. Chapter 6. Diamonds were graded into 4 C's. The so-called 4 C's were the abbreviation of the 4 C's. It mainly refers to the weight of the diamond, carat weight, the clarity of the diamond, the color of the diamond, and the cutting of the diamond. Of course, it is said to be the 4 Cs, but in fact, the most important are 2. The first is the weight, the so-called carat. 5 carats is equal to 1 gram. The second is the clarity, also known as the translucency. The color referred to the reflection, and the cutting referred to the person's handiwork. These 2 factors weren't particularly important, because they could be changed. However, the size and translucency of the diamond couldn't be changed. The diamond Zhang Hai obtained was about 6 grams in size. It was truly priceless. After confirming the authenticity of the diamond, Zhang Hai took about half an hour to recover. Then, he kept staring at the diamond. Manager Zhang of the auction house rushed over as soon as he heard the news. Looking at Zhang Hai, he hesitated for a moment, then sat down in front of Zhang Hai and coughed softly. Ahem, Mr. Zhang, your gems have been appraised for you. If I may ask, are you going to sell these gems or go back and collect them? Looking at Zhang Hai, Manager Zhang asked with a serious face. Ahem, if I'm going to sell them, what do you mean? Hearing Manager Zhang's words, Zhang Hai really did want to take them back and keep them. After all, according to the appraiser just now, a 31.6-carat pink diamond was worth $380,000 per carat, which was $12 million. Not to mention that it was a complete diamond. 20 times more. Did you know what 20 times meant? $240 million. Zhang Hai had never even thought about such a large sum of money before, let alone seen it. $240 million was equivalent to more than 1 billion RMB when converted to RMB. Although it was still a far cry from the billions in his wife's, ex-wife's family, it shouldn't be forgotten that his wife's family was a small business empire, while he only had 1 diamond. However, he still remembered the reason he brought the diamond here. He was here to sell it, not to appraise it. If you want to sell it, I'll give you 2 options. The first is to auction it. According to our appraiser, if you auction this pink diamond, the lowest price won't be lower than 240 million, and the highest will be around 400 million. However, we'll need some time to use and publicize it. In the end, we'll auction it in the United States or Europe. At that time, you'll have to pay us 5% of the commission and the corresponding country's auction tax, which is around 20%. After hearing Manager Zhang's words, Zhang Hai's first impression was that this guy was bluffing him. Although he had never auctioned a diamond before, he had never seen a pig run. In other novels, there was no charge. Even the auction house did not charge for the items they sold. But this time, a quarter of their profits were taken away. Was this guy trying to cheat them? This is the auction tax of each country. You can check it online. Manager Zhang was a person who had seen a lot. He knew what Zhang Hai meant when he saw his expression, so he took out a form and handed it to him. Looking at the form, Zhang Hai took out his mobile phone to check it. He couldn't help but secretly click his tongue. The tax he had to pay was really expensive. It was understandable. If you auction it in this country, why wouldn't they charge you tax? And most importantly, if you want to take it abroad, you have to pay tax. Currently, it was 6%. This thing really needed money everywhere. According to the form, because Zhang Hai was a foreigner, he enjoyed the extra income tax of foreigners when he auctioned in other countries. It wasn't as heavy as his own country, but it wasn't light either. For example, the United Kingdom collected 24%, Australia collected 27%, the United States collected 22%, and the lightest tax was Hong Kong in Huaxia, which collected 18%. Of course, there were also countries that were lighter than Hong Kong. Basically, it was the third world in Huaxia. The tax of Huaxia's auction collection was your auction price minus the purchase price or the original lowest price, leaving 20% of the net income. If it was an ancestral collection that couldn't be valued, then only 3% of the total auction price would be collected. It looked very little, really very little, but there was a problem. If it was a collection worth tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or even millions, it would be fine to sell it. But this thing worth more than 1 billion yuan, was it really yours just because you said it was yours? Did you buy it? Where's the invoice? Where's the credit card? When did you buy it? Who sold it? What? You said it was ancestral? Which ancestor did you pass it down? Where's the family tree? If you called it, would it answer? You said it was yours just because you said it was yours. How could you prove it was yours? So this thing was dug out of the soil. The things dug out were the countries. So from the beginning, Zhang Hai and manager Zhang didn't change the issue of auctioning it in China. However, to be honest, Zhang Hai was a little reluctant to take out a quarter of it to give to those guys abroad. The most important thing was that it had to be auctioned after the publicity was over. By then, the money would probably be transferred in 1.5 years. What's the second method? Looking at manager Zhang, Zhang Hai hesitated and asked him. The second way is for us to buy this gemstone first. The lowest auction price of this gemstone is 240 million. We'll buy it at a 30% discount. Then, you won't have to pay any fees. The money can be directly transferred to your card. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, manager Zhang also smiled. In fact, the reason why he said this was to let Zhang Hai choose the latter path. It was a verbal trap, but Zhang Hai was willing to jump into it. After all, if this diamond were to be auctioned, it could be sold for 400 million. Now that they had accepted it for 300 million, they could sell it privately according to the auction price. After all, the connections of the auction house were extraordinarily strong. Those rich guys from the Middle East probably wouldn't mind spending 400 million yuan on a diamond for fun. In that case, they would make a net profit of 100 million yuan. Such a good deal wasn't easy to get. As for Zhang Hai, he could also sell it privately, but here was the problem. First of all, he didn't have the connections. He didn't know anyone who could casually throw away $400 million as pocket money. $400 million was more than 2 billion RMB. It was enough to buy 40% of his wife's company shares, and at a premium. Obviously, he didn't have access to people at that level. Second of all, if he sold it, other people would take advantage of him. Did he think he could beat them? It wouldn't be too hard for someone who could spend hundreds of millions on diamonds to kill him. Even if he fought to the death, the net would be broken. This was the problem that Zhang Hai was facing. But to be honest, it wasn't a problem for Zhang Hai. I'll sell it for $330 million, Zhang Hai said to manager Zhang after hesitating for only a few seconds. Not to mention 300 million, he would do it even if it were 240 million yuan. What else was there to say? He simply bought it on the spot. Manager Zhang was stunned for a moment when he heard Zhang Hai's words. He then left the room. About 5 minutes later, he came back and agreed to Zhang Hai's offer. Things were much simpler after that. Of course, it wasn't like buying groceries at the market, where they just agreed on the price, paid, and got the groceries. Selling a diamond, especially one worth $330 million, required a lot of contracts. After signing about 5 contracts, the pink diamond belonged to the Phillips auction house. Zhang Hai also had $330 million, but it was a little troublesome to transfer the money. Because $1 could be exchanged for 3,418 yuan, so 330 million was 2,927,400 yuan. Such a large transfer would probably alarm the central government. This amount is indeed a little big. Why don't I get you an overseas credit card so that you can transfer the money? Manager Zhang said with a smile when he saw Zhang Hai's hesitant expression. Overseas credit card? Looking at manager Zhang, Zhang Hai looked at him strangely. Yes, overseas credit cards. We have a very close relationship with the major banks in Europe and the United States. After all, there are some collections, in addition to being placed in our bank's safe, some are also placed in the bank's safe. After all, that is one of the safest places in the world. Looking at Jiang Hai, Manager Zhang said with a smile. Then he told the protagonist about the banks he could apply for, such as London's National Westminster, America's Citigroup, America's Visa, America's JP Morgan Chase, and America's American Express. Among these banks, Jiang Hai had only heard of Visa, but Manager Zhang had always recommended American Express and JP Morgan Chase. There was nothing much to say about American Express. It was the world's largest travel service, comprehensive financial management, financial investment, and information processing company. In terms of credit cards, it had always been the strongest. The Centurion Black Gold card that it issued was known as the strongest card in the world. And JP Morgan Chase was the royal bank of the two largest consortiums in the United States, Rockefeller and Morgan. They didn't accept foreign missions because the missions from the two families alone were enough. Although Jiang Hai didn't know much about consortiums, as a poor man, he naturally rejected the word consortiums. So after hesitating for a while, he decided to use American Express. Manager Zhang had already done it. An hour later, there was a black titanium alloy card in his hand. There was a Roman soldier's head printed on it. Chapter 7. Congratulations, Mr. Jiang. From now on, you're a real billionaire. You're probably the youngest billionaire to become such a young billionaire without relying on your family's connections. Manager Zhang said enviously as the black gold card in Jiang Hai's hand was activated. Although he had helped the company complete this transaction, there would be a lot of negative points. However, he estimated that the negative points would only be around 10 million yuan, and that was RMB. Compared with Jiang Hai's $330 million, it was indeed a huge difference. It was impossible to say that he wasn't envious at all. Now, he was wondering if he had any suitable nieces that he could introduce to Jiang Hai. Ha! Hearing the manager's compliment, Jiang Hai smiled a little awkwardly. He was still a little confused at the moment. The black gold card has a lot of services. Mr. Jiang can slowly study them in the future. For example, you can enter the special lounges in major airports for free, and upgrade the rooms in any hotel that cooperates with American Express. Of course, more than 99% of five-star hotels in the world have a suitable relationship with American Express. For example, you don't need to make an appointment to rent a car in advance. You can enjoy the charter service and a free guide without making an appointment. There's no limit to how much you can use the card, and the points you spend can also be exchanged for a lot of good things. Of course, these things are indeed good things to me, but they're probably worthless to Mr. Jiang. The most special service is that you can help Mr. Jiang with his investment and financial management. Seeing Jiang Hai looking at the card in his hand, Manager Zhang introduced the functions of the card to Jiang Hai. Indeed, the function of the card was quite good. It could be said that as long as he went out with the card, as long as he didn't go to a remote mountain area, he would enjoy the services of an emperor. The free services alone were quite good. Of course, this kind of card also had different levels. Jiang Hai's assets were now $330 million, and he was enjoying the services of the level 3 black gold card. It could be said that the services were all upgraded. Of course, the annual fee was quite high too. It was $50,000. Of course, if he swiped more than $50 million from the card each year, the annual fee could be waived. However, the money in the card couldn't be less than 100 million, or it would be downgraded. For now, Jiang Hai didn't care whether it was downgraded or not. To be honest, there were many things that he had only heard about but had never seen before. For example, renting a car, chartering a plane, and always hearing about it on TV, but he had never done it even once. Regarding this, he had nothing to say other than chuckling. By the way, Mr. Jiang, after you have this money, are you interested in investing in modern art? Looking at Jiang Hai's confused look, Manager Zhang began to promote. Modern art, to put it bluntly, was the art collections that appeared in the past 100 years. For example, the most famous modern artists, such as Qi Baishi, Su Beihong, Zhang Daqian, and so on. The works of these people, even if they were modern artists, were the fastest growing category at present. They often saw the works of these people on some treasure appraisal programs. The small ones were hundreds of thousands of dollars, and the big ones were millions or tens of millions. It could be said that the growth was very fierce. Unfortunately, Jiang Hai didn't understand these things. Moreover, his original goal was to spend the money to improve his strength. I'm not interested in these things. I'm very interested in land. I don't know what the land in China is like now. I'm very interested in some foreign fishing grounds, ranches, and so on. Looking at Manager Zhang, Jiang Hai thought for a moment and said to him. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Manager Zhang's eyes lit up at once. Our auction house also accepts a lot of ranches and fishing grounds for auction or mortgage, but unlike ordinary ranches and fishing grounds, our auction house only accepts large-scale land transactions. I don't know how big the land Mr. Jiang wants to buy is. Looking at Jiang Hai, Manager Zhang said quickly, as if he was afraid that Jiang Hai couldn't hear him. His voice unconsciously rose by 30%. The size doesn't matter. The most important thing is that the scenery is good, and there is no pollution, no pollution, no pollution, no pollution. Important things should be repeated 3 times. Hearing Manager Zhang's words, Jiang Hai was also shocked, and then whispered. No pollution? This is easy. Except for some places on the high seas and third world countries, the land in other developed countries is not polluted. Let me show you. Looking at Manager Zhang's enthusiastic look, Jiang Hai couldn't say anything. He could only postpone his departure, and he was also very interested in these places. Over the years, everyone knew that it was good to go abroad, so the number of people who went abroad to buy land was increasing day by day. Even the housing prices were rising. People who went abroad to buy land first went to 3 places. First, Oceania, whether it was Australia or New Zealand, was a good place for immigrants. The scenery was beautiful, there was no pollution, water was abundant, the land was sparsely populated, the land was cheap, and the products were abundant. It could be said that Oceania was a good place for immigrants. Buy a ranch to raise sheep, and there was no need to worry about the sales of the wool. The mainland alone could consume all the wool. The fish farm bought, whether it was to raise lobsters or some economic fish, similarly, the mainland would also consume all the wool. The high-grade wool would be sold to Europe and the United States, and the low-grade wool would be sold to the mainland, making a lot of money. Manager Zhang introduced these 2 places at the beginning, but to be honest, Jiang Hai didn't have any thoughts about immigrating to Australia. Because there were some anti-Chinese people in this country, it didn't matter if they went there, but now Jiang Hai was no longer willing to swallow his anger, so he didn't want to go there. Seeing that Jiang Hai didn't seem to be interested in Oceania, Manager Zhang immediately changed the topic, saying that Oceania might not be suitable for Jiang Hai, so he recommended the second place, the most common place for immigrants, Canada. Europe seemed to be a good place for skilled people to migrate. The standard of living was high, but the prices were also high. But as long as they lived in the city, they could live comfortably. But there was a saying, Europe was too crowded. For people like Jiang Hai who wanted to buy ranches and fish farms, naturally, he had to go to a bigger country. If Oceania was not in his plan, then Canada was also a good choice. The scenery was beautiful, and there were also many unpolluted areas. The water was abundant, and almost shared with the United States, whether it was freshwater or seawater. The land was sparsely populated, and the land was cheap. These adjectives were also good for Canada. Over here, Phillips owned dozens of properties, including small islands, fertile fields, large grasslands, fish farms, mountains. There was nothing that Jiang Hai couldn't think of, but Jiang Hai still didn't like it. The reason was the same, it was also anti-Chinese. Seeing that Jiang Hai didn't like Canada, Manager Zhang couldn't help but touch his nose awkwardly. If Canada doesn't work, then only the United States is left. What do you think of this place? After thinking for a while, manager Zhang took out a new album and introduced it to Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai naturally knew the most about the United States. It was the world's most powerful country, and it was always shouting at countries all over the world. To be honest, Jiang Hai didn't have a good impression of this country. Another point was that this country was also anti-Chinese. So when manager Zhang said this, Jiang Hai wanted to refuse, but manager Zhang went to talk to Jiang Hai first. Mr. Jiang, I understand what you're thinking. There will always be some people who are biased against you when you're alone in a foreign country. This is inevitable as long as you're overseas. You want to buy large-scale ranches and fish farms. In this world, there are only a few countries that can provide such large-scale ranches and fish farms. Manager Zhang looked at Jiang Hai and continued. You don't have to think about China. The land won't belong to you even if you buy it. In Russia, even if you buy it, you won't be able to hire workers. Europe is too crowded. The land you want to buy might be bigger than a small country. This won't work either. As for South America, the Middle East, and Africa, if they dare to sell it to you, would you dare to go there? So in general, there are only these three places that are suitable for you to buy land. You said that Australia and Canada are anti-Chinese. I won't say much about this. I'm also a descendant of the Yellow Emperor. I know the situation here because their land is too big and there are too few people. So, I can understand that you don't like these two places. But the US is different. Putting aside my personal feelings, there are 300 million people in this country. Moreover, it's a country with a clear racial meaning. Indeed, the laws in every state are different. Some states are actually different, like Texas. But there are many states that are suitable for Chinese immigrants. In the local areas, the status of the Chinese can even be guaranteed. Manager Zhang looked at Jiang Hai and said a lot of things in one breath. Jiang Hai was afraid that he would suffocate. But Jiang Hai listened to what Manager Zhang said. What Manager Zhang said seemed to make sense. Indeed, there will be good and bad people everywhere. There is no need for him to be a bad person, right? Manager Zhang saw that Jiang Hai's face was a little relaxed, so he immediately introduced the places to Jiang Hai. There are a total of 6 places in the US that are suitable for Chinese immigrants. The first are California and California. But there are some problems here. First, there is serious desertification. Second, the land is very expensive. Other than that, the second recommended place is Washington. There is Seattle here. Bruce Lee came here in the past. The third recommended place is Oregon. In fact, the most suitable place for grazing is Montana, which is not far from Oregon. But the transportation there is too inconvenient. At least there is Portland in Oregon. The fourth recommended place is New York. But you can't buy land in New York because there is no place. You can buy land in northern New Jersey. It is also in the metropolitan area of New York. The land prices there are quite reasonable. The fifth recommended place is Florida. The only problem is that it might be a little chaotic here. The sixth recommended place is Boston, Massachusetts. Chapter 8. Who? Squeak. As the roar of the engine gradually faded, the harsh friction between the huge tires and the runway also passed into Jiang Hai's ears, which made him frown. He gently removed the blindfold that was still stuck on his eyes and looked out of the window. When he saw the clear sky outside, the discomfort in his heart dissipated a little. Hey, Jiang, we should get off the plane. Just as Jiang Hai slowly stretched and was about to sit up, a slightly exaggerated voice sounded in his ear. Hearing this voice, Jiang Hai couldn't help but look at him helplessly. I know, no matter how anxious you are, if the plane doesn't stop, how can you get off? Jump? Facing this person, Jiang Hai said angrily. Huh, Jiang, you are so humorous. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the other party didn't mind at all and said with a hesitant accent. As the plane stopped, after the bridge connected, the two walked out of the plane. Because of Jiang Hai's card, the two didn't need to line up for security. They went directly through the special passage and came outside the airport. At this time, outside the airport, a car had been waiting there for a long time. Seeing Jiang Hai and the figure of the person next to him, a white driver nodded gently and opened the door. The two didn't hesitate and sat directly in. "Jiang, should we go back to the hotel to rest first, or should we go take a look at that piece of land first?" "That piece of land is not far from the airport. It's only about an hour's drive from the city." Looking at Jiang Hai, who was sitting there, Sui Qian continued. "Don't scare me, do you think I don't know where this is? The place we are going to is the opposite of the city. This is General Edward Lawrence Rosen International Airport, Boston is to the south, and Winthrop is to the north." Rolling his eyes at the person next to him, Jiang Hai took out his mobile phone with a look of displeasure. It was a map of Boston. "Oh, I didn't expect my employer to be so smart. Not only is he so rich at such a young age, but he also knows so much about burials. It really makes me ashamed." Seeing that Jiang Hai exposed his words, the man didn't care at all and continued. "If you don't shut your mouth, your smart employer will be replaced." After taking another glance at this person, Jiang Hai lowered his voice and said. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, this person immediately shut his mouth. "To Winthrop." Seeing the man's actions, Jiang Hai said to the driver in front of him. Then he leaned back in the back seat and continued to get up slowly. It has been almost a month since he got the money. Because at the auction house back then, they finally decided to come to the United States to look at the land, and everything went smoothly. As expected of the world's third largest auction house, Phillips's ability was still there for all to see. Others needed a month to get their passports and visas, but they only needed 10 days to get them into Jiang Hai's hands. Then Jiang Hai bought a plane to the United States. His first stop was California. As for the blabbermouth next to him, his name was Will Anthony. He was a black man who worked for Phillips in the United States. Because he was the only one who could speak fluent Chinese, he was specially sent to follow Jiang Hai, or to take Jiang Hai to see the land in the United States. There were many places in California that were suitable for Chinese people to live. Needless to say, there were many other places, such as San Francisco, which was regarded as a place where Chinese people lived in the United States. The folk customs were still very good, at least anti-Chinese things rarely happened here. In addition, there were some other cities, such as San Diego, Irvine. In short, California was a very suitable place for Chinese people to live, but Jiang Hai gave up on this place immediately. There were 3 reasons. First, the land here was too expensive. Second, there was too little fresh water. Third, the Chinese people here were basically from the south. He didn't feel like home here. So they went to other places. The second place they went was also in the south, Orlando, a small city, but it was a famous leisure city. However, it was a little too close to South America. After Jiang Hai finished exploring the site, he saw a robbery when he was strolling on the street. Well, this place was also ruled out by Jiang Hai. Then they went to the north, first to Seattle, Washington. To be honest, Seattle was very good, and Jiang Hai was very fond of it. This city was rich in freshwater resources and even more rich in seawater resources. After all, it was close to the Pacific Ocean. The forests and greenery were done quite well, and the quality of life in this city was very high, which made Jiang Hai very tempted. The most important thing was that the climate was good, with a temperate oceanic climate. The 4 seasons were distinct, and the winter was not too cold. It was not very humid, and it was completely dry. It was indeed a very suitable place for humans to live. This was the first place he considered, but the only problem was that this place was as prone to earthquakes as California. Then they went to Portland, Oregon, and he also felt that this place was very good. Portland was known as the City of Roses, and it was a perfect garden city. There were a lot of grasslands on the periphery, and it was indeed a good place to use as a ranch. Moreover, the people were quite friendly. This was the second place Jiang Hai considered. The only problem was that there was no sea here. In the end, they decided to go to Boston and New York. To be honest, even the most optimistic people did not feel that it was possible to find a good place in New York. Even Jiang Hai did not think so. However, Boston was a good place. The world's understanding of this place was mainly because of the universities here. It had the world's top university, Harvard, the top economics institute, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and the top music university, Berklee College of Music. Other than that, there were also the Ivy League members, Tufts University and Boston College. It could be said that this was a university town. Other than that, this was the city with the most history in the United States. The world's first electric street came from here. The world's first telephone line came from here. The birthplace of national football came from here. The birthplace of basketball also came from here. Everyone was familiar with the first dynasty of the NBA, the Boston Celtics, who had an 8-game winning streak, was also here. Jiang Hai used to be a fake fan, so he still had a good impression of this place. Along the way, the education level in the Boston area was very high, and the cleanliness of the ground was also very high. However, if you looked at the city area, you would feel that the whole city was very crowded. Indeed, this was one of the birthplaces of the United States. When it was first built, it was very crowded. Luckily, Jiang Hai does not need to squeeze with them in this city. He wants to live in the suburbs. This is also a coastal area, and compared to California and Seattle, it is not considered an earthquake zone. The chances of earthquakes are not high, and this is considered an advantage. The weather is normal, and there are occasional snowstorms. But to Jiang Hai, who lives in Bing City, snowstorms are nothing. He is afraid of everything. Compared to California, Boston does not have the threat of earthquakes. It is not hot, and the prices are lower. Most importantly, there are grasslands. Compared to Seattle, there is no threat of earthquakes here. Although land prices are slightly higher, nothing is more important than life. Compared to Oregon, Boston has the sea. Alright. Other than the sea, nothing else can be compared to Boston. What? Florida and New York? Alright. Jiang Hai had not considered buying land in these two places from the start. As Dong Xuebing was thinking about this, the car sped forward. The roads in the United States are not wide, but once they are out of the city, they will reach the highway. There are almost no exits from the highway, and the roads are flat. This is not something China can compare to. If you want to buy a sports car in China, you must first raise the chassis. If not, the chassis will be crushed in less than half a mile. But in the United States, you do not need to worry about this. The roads are good, and the car is fast. After a while, they reached Jiang Hai's destination. Look, Jiang. This is our target this time. Green Forest Manor. As Will Anthony pointed to the scenery outside the window, Jiang Hai looked over. But when he looked over, his eyes widened. There is a voice in his heart telling him that he wants this place. At this moment, in his eyes, this manor called Green Forest was really beautiful. Looking out of the car window, the first thing that entered his eyes was a green sea of grass. The grass was about knee-high, swaying gently with the breeze. Further away, there was a large forest. Because this was a coastal area, the sea breeze was very strong. Naturally, it was necessary to plant trees to reduce the effect of the wind on the grass. On the other side of the forest, there is a sea at a glance. Between the sea and the green grass is a golden beach. On the other side of the beach, there is a small manor with many small trees planted there. But Jiang Hai knows that those are not trees, but grape trellis. The biggest advantage of this manor is that it is a comprehensive manor with a ranch, a fishing ground, and a winery. It can be said that no matter what you want to do, you can do it here. Looking at the scenery in front of him, Jiang Hai can't help but click his tongue. Based on the current situation, this is the place he is most satisfied with. Because this place has been abandoned for a while, there are almost no herds of cattle or other living creatures. But this natural scenery is enough to shift the scales in Jiang Hai's heart. The car drove for about 10 minutes before arriving at the entrance of this large ranch. At this time, a middle-aged man was standing in front of the ranch. When he saw the car slowly drive in, a trace of worry flashed across his face, but he still put on a smile and greeted them. Chapter 9. Honorable gentlemen, hello. My name is Robbins Garcia. I'm temporarily in charge of this manor. Seeing Jiang Hai and Will Anthony get out of the car, the middle-aged man greeted them with a slightly forced smile. Hello, my name is Jiang Hai. You can call me Jiang. He shook hands with the middle-aged man. It was a pair of strong hands covered with calluses. It seemed that this man was an expert at doing things. Hello, Mr. Jiang. I understand why you're here. Come with me. Knowing that Jiang Hai was Chinese, the other party spoke English slowly. Although Jiang Hai did not have much opportunity to speak English before, after all, English was required to pass level 4 in university. Only this was not easy to use with money, so he still knew a little. In addition, after knowing that he was coming to the United States, he also learned English in the half a month he stayed in the capital. He did not know if it was because of the dragon tattoo, but his brain was much smarter than before. After half a month of intensive learning, plus listening and reading after arriving in the United States, except for some strange slang, as long as the other party spoke slowly, he could probably understand. This was also the reason why Will Anthony was not in a hurry to translate for Jiang Hai. Okay. Hearing Robbins Garcia's words, Jiang Hai also nodded. Then he and Will Anthony followed the middle-aged man into the manor. In Europe, the United States, Canada, and Australia, the unit used to buy land was similar to that used in China. 1 acre was equivalent to 6 acres of land. Here, the price of land was also calculated by acres. The land was different, so the price of land was naturally different. If it was in Texas, Montana, and other places, the price of land was really not high. 1 acre was about $1,000 to $2,000. If it was in New Mexico, 1 acre of land was even less than $1,000. Some sellers who were eager to sell the land even lowered the price to $550 at the lowest. However, this price was not even worth thinking about in the East. It was known that the land in the East was expensive without any reason. As for the land in the Eastern metropolitan area, it was not even worth thinking about in Massachusetts, let alone in Boston. According to the information that Jiang Hai checked, in Boston's Winthrop County, the average price of land here was $12,700 per acre. For the same price, one could buy 6 acres of land in Montana. However, here, it was only worth 1 acre. According to the information on the manor, there was a total of 11,200 acres of land. Among them, 9,200 acres were grazing areas and 1 acre of woodland. The trees planted there were more than 10 years old and belonged to Jiang Hai. As long as Jiang Hai wanted to, he could cut them down at any time. However, if there was a snowstorm or a typhoon and he suffered losses, he would not be able to find a place to cry. The insurance company would not insure a manor without trees to shelter it. There was also 1,000 acres of a huge wine manor behind the residential area. There were 3 kinds of grapes planted there, but there was no one taking care of it now. The price of the land here alone was $142.24 million. It was the largest manor in the area. The original owner of this manor was a major director of Lehman Brothers Holdings, the 4th largest investment company in the world. At its peak, the company's market value was as high as $691 billion. Unfortunately, it was all an illusion. Under the subprime mortgage crisis in 2008, the company's assets were greatly reduced and it finally declared bankruptcy. One could imagine the life of this major shareholder. The shares that were originally worth tens of billions of dollars became waste paper. In order to make up for his debts, he had to sell his fixed assets. He had sold this manor to Phillips for $150 million, but now Phillips was going to sell it to Jiang Hai for $280 million. These guys were really evil. Of course, Jiang Hai did not know this. He only knew that this place covered an area of 11,200 acres, with a sea area of 720 square kilometers. With his ranch as the boundary, the coastal boundary of the ranch was a total of 4.2 kilometers. It was in the shape of an arc running along the coast. It was a total of 8 stations away. However, compared to the extension of the sea, it was a far cry. This was because his economic fishery had a range of 171 kilometers. According to the standard calculation of the sea level, it was a full 92 nautical miles. According to the current speed of the sea level, the boat could travel at a speed of 30 knots per hour. To reach the end, it would take 3 hours. If he wanted to walk around, he would have to spend a day on the boat. This large area, if Jiang Hai nodded, would be his. The land here is great, really great. I don't know about the results of planting crops, but the vegetables and pastures are growing very well. There are 3 water sources nearby. Apart from the Atlantic Ocean that we can see, there is also a short bay. Of course, there is also a lot of fresh water. There is Lake Lewis nearby. There is a lot of underground water in the lake, so we don't lack any fresh water here. The previous owner of this place laid out 4 water channels here, which can completely solve the water needs for daily use and irrigation. After entering the manor, Robbins Garcia had already prepared 3 4-wheeled motorcycles at the entrance. They were also called all-terrain vehicles. Normally, they were not allowed on the road, but in the ranch, they were one of the best modes of transportation. Jiang Hai had a driver's license before, but he had almost never driven a car. It was also his first time riding one. Fortunately, Robbins Garcia took care of Jiang Hai, so he didn't ride too much. The 3 of them rode on the small car and sped on the vast grassland. While riding, Robbins Garcia told Jiang Hai about the situation here. In other ranches, the most troublesome thing is to change farms when the season comes. Because the grass in one place has been eaten up, they have to leave the seeds and move to another pasture. But here, we don't have to worry at all. We can raise up to 200,000 cows, but the cost is too high. We only need to raise 50,000 cows, and then we can change farms freely. We don't have to worry about forage at all. We don't even have to worry about the hay used in winter and fattening. Looking at Jiang Hai's curious look, Luo Binsi continued. It can be seen that Luo Binsi was very knowledgeable about this grassland. Looking at his proud appearance, Luo Binsi should have known about this place before. Before 2008, the net profit from the beef production alone was $11 million, and that's under the premise that it's not full. If it's full, it'll be at least 3 times more. The wine manor over there can make the best red wine. The red wine here has even won prizes in international competitions. It's not a problem to sell a bottle for dozens of dollars. The 1,000 acres of wine production can make at least hundreds of thousands of bottles a year. Excluding the labor and the cost of the raw materials, it can still make more than 5 million francs. Soon, the group rode from the grassland to the wine-growing area. The wine shelves here had been there for many years, but unfortunately, there was nothing on them now. After the wine-growing area, there was the forest. Logically speaking, these things were the most valuable. After all, in China, trees were sold by square meters. But obviously, in the United States, there was a tree economic zone that specialized in selling trees. No one would sell a protected forest like this, so Robbins Garcia didn't introduce too much. Finally, I'll introduce the most important thing here, the fishing industry. Before 2008, there was a 100-ton fishing boat here. I heard that the annual income was more than $20 million. I don't know how much exactly, but it should be more than that. It has been 7 years since there was a fishing operation here, so there should be a lot of resources underwater. After passing through the woods, they came to the seaside. As soon as they arrived at the seaside, the smell of the sea got into Jiang Hai's nose. Robbins Garcia also stopped here, stretched his body against the sea breeze, and said to Jiang Hai. As the sea breeze blew, Jiang Hai's spirit also improved a little. Sir, although I know that there should be more than one person who said this to you, I still have to say that this place is really good. The land and the pasture is very good, and the water and the fishery is also excellent. It only takes more than an hour to reach Boston by car. It's just across the sea from Long Island in New York. If you walk on land, you can reach the Big Apple in about 3 hours. There is no pollution near here, and the air index can also be ranked in the top in the United States. I think you have been to Montana. The air there is very good, but it is filled with the smell of cow dung, but the air here is sweet. Robbins Garcia seemed to see the satisfaction in Jiang Hai's eyes, but Jiang Hai did not speak. Not only was Will Anthony not easy to deal with, but even Robbins Garcia was a little anxious. He couldn't help but say to Jiang Hai. Looking at the sea in front of him, Jiang Hai nodded gently. To be honest, he was quite satisfied with this place. But at this price, he did have $330 million. To be exact, he had $332 million. The $2 million was obtained after he sold the other stones and the crystals. If he really bought this place, he would only have $50 million left after spending $280 million. He was also a little scared to spend so much money. So, although he was very satisfied with this place, he had not nodded. He was also thinking about whether it was worth it or not. Ugh! Just when Jiang Hai felt that $280 million was too expensive and wanted to think about it again, his chest suddenly became hot. He was not unfamiliar with this feeling. After quietly glancing at his chest, Jiang Hai nodded, I want this place. Chapter 10. I didn't expect it to be so fast. Looking at the tattoo on his chest, Jiang Hai couldn't help but mutter softly. The reason why his chest felt hot at noon today was because of this tattoo. In recent days, he often had this feeling. As long as the scales grew, it would be like this. But if he used his blood to activate something, he would have a feeling of palpitations. It was a very uncomfortable feeling. It could be said that he was already used to this feeling of growing scales. But what surprised him was the time. In China, he could grow a scale in 5 days in Ice City. In Beijing, he could grow a scale in 8 days. It was slightly better in the United States, 3 days in California, and 2.5 days in Oregon and Washington. He remembered that when he left Portland yesterday, the scales had only grown by 2/3. Even if Boston's feng shui was good, it should have only grown at night or the next day. But when he came here, in just a few hours, the scales had already grown by 1/3. At that time, he had already decided to buy this place. The foundation of his life depended on this big snake. Now, no matter what, it liked this place, so he must buy it. Seeing that Jiang Hai had finally relented, Will Anthony and Robbins Garcia breathed a sigh of relief. Then, they returned to the residential area here. To make such a big place, with a ranch, a fishing ground, and a wine manor, it would require at least 10 people to operate. It was inevitable that the manor owner would provide food and accommodation for these hired people, and the previous manor owner obviously did not lack money. Therefore, the residential area here was quite well built. The houses of ordinary cowboys, fishermen, and winemakers were all 2-story buildings with an attic on the upper half to store things. There were 4 rooms in the small building, a huge living room, a basement, a bathroom, a kitchen, and so on. Everything was available. There were a total of 15 small buildings like this. It seemed that there used to be 15 people or 15 families here. As for the big house where the owner lived, it was really a little scary. The foundation area of the big house was half an acre, about 2,000 square meters. Walking into the first floor, there was a huge living room. Although it had been emptied at this time, the format was still very good. The square hall was about 200 square meters. On the left side of the square hall was a public bathroom about 50 square meters. It was probably used to entertain guests during meetings or parties. Next to the bathroom was a kitchen about 100 square meters. The kitchen utensils here were also emptied, only empty holes could be seen. But thinking about it, there was no need to worry about not having a place to store kitchen utensils in the future. Next to the kitchen was a huge bathroom. There was even a place for bathing in the middle. The entire bathroom covered an area of about 300 square meters. Next to the bathroom was a huge storeroom. There was no more storeroom on the left side. On the right side, there were a lot of things. For example, the laundry area. There was a special cold storage to store vegetables and meat. There was another cold storage outside. After all, Feng Yu was rearing fish and cows. It would be very tasteless to keep these things at home. So, there was only a cold storage for vegetables and some other things that looked like storerooms. At the end of the corridor, there were many rooms. According to Luo Binsi, these rooms were for the servants. Hearing this, Jiang Hai smiled. Servants? The servants' rooms must have an independent air conditioner and floor heating. The bathroom and bathroom were separated. The bathroom must have a shower and a bathtub. There should be a walk-in closet. Looking at the internet cables and cable TV plugs on the floor, there should be a TV and a computer. There was a big bedroom and a big living room. According to Jiang Hai, the servants' rooms should be about 60 square meters. When Jiang Hai lived with his parents in Bing City, their house was only about 40 square meters. This was the difference. But compared to the bedrooms on the second floor, the rooms on the ground floor were for the servants. Although everything was moved out, the rooms on the second floor were like hotel rooms. All of them were suites. There were a total of 12 rooms on the second floor. Other than the gym room, there was a study room, a gaming room, a karaoke room, and a room for watching movies. There were 8 bedrooms. One of them was the master bedroom, and the other 7 bedrooms were for the guests. Basically, all the rooms looked the same. After entering the house, there was a living room that was about 50 square meters. Next to the living room was a big bathroom. Next to the bathroom was a small room. It was about 15 or 16 square meters. On the other side, there was a big guest room. The room was about 40 square meters and there was a small bathroom. Other than that, this room had a small kitchen and a balcony. From the balcony, Feng Yu could see the beach and the sea. Feng Yu was sad. A guest room was about 156 square meters. How could he live like this? But when Jiang Hai thought about how these rooms would be his in the future, he calmed down a little. It wasn't until they visited the master bedroom that Jiang Hai felt even more balanced. Because the master bedroom was bigger, it had a separate cloakroom that was 30 square meters in size. There were many wardrobes inside, and there was also a larger bathroom and bathroom. Jiang Hai didn't know who this shameless guy was bathing with all day long. The bathtub that hadn't been removed was enough to seat 4 people without a problem. There was also a small study room, a big kitchen, 2 living rooms. One was the entrance living room, and the other was a separate living room. The 2 small bedrooms were about 10 square meters, and the master bedroom was about 80 square meters. Feng Yu wondered if it was because the bed was too big, so the previous owner of this house left it behind. The bed was about 4 meters by 6 meters. Feng Yu wondered if this bed was for sleeping or for wrestling. But if he thought about it, it would be very comfortable to sleep here. After visiting these rooms, Jiang Hai finally found some comfort in the money he spent. After looking at these things, he did not say much. He directly told Will Anthony that he wanted this house for 280 million yuan. He did not return to Boston. Instead, he bought some daily necessities in the nearby county and lived here. He did not forget why he spent 280 million yuan. It was mainly for the long worm on his chest. He wanted to see if he could really speed up his evolution process here. If it did not work, He could go back on his word at any time before the contract was signed tomorrow. However, it seemed that this place did not give him a chance to go back on his word. Because at night, another snake scale grew on his chest. About 8 hours for one scale. That's great. In this case, there are 3 scales a day. There are a total of 1,080 scales on this snake. At present, 137 scales have grown. In less than a year, it will be able to evolve. Touching the perfect 8-pack on his body, the tattoo on it, Jiang Hai could not help but smile. He began to look forward to it. Peng peng peng. Just as Jiang Hai was admiring the snake scales on his body, a series of knocks came from outside. Who is it? Jiang Hai, who was showing off, was shocked when he heard the knock on the door. It's me. Mr. Jiang. Hearing the question inside, Robin's voice came from outside the door. Oh, wait a minute. Immediately putting on his clothes, Jiang Hai walked to the door, opened the door, and saw Robin standing at the door. It's very late. Robins, what's the matter? Looking at the hesitant Robins, Jiang Hai asked with some doubts. It's like this, Mr. Jiang, I want to invite you to dinner. I know that you Huaxia people have this habit of saying things at the dinner table. When you went to buy a quilt in the afternoon, I went to catch a few fish and some beef. Please try my cooking. Looking at Jiang Hai, Robins hesitated and said to him. Oh. Okay. Hearing Robin's words, Jiang Hai smiled. Northeasterners are very straightforward. In the case of ensuring his safety, the other party invited him to dinner. Naturally, he would not be polite. After tidying up, Jiang Hai followed Robins to his room. His room is the only one in the 15 small buildings that still has people living in it. Walking there suddenly, it's really a little scary. In fact, Jiang Hai's room is even scarier, but the two of them don't care about this. When they entered Robin's room, they saw a few pots of things on the table in his room. Jiang Hai saw that there was a pot of roast beef. The beef was cut into steaks as thick as 10 pieces. The roast was crispy on the outside and tender on the inside. The top was sprinkled with spices such as black pepper. As soon as he walked in, he could smell it. This made Jiang Hai feel his stomach shrink. In addition to the steak, there were 2 pots. One of them was filled with a fish. Jiang Hai didn't know what kind of fish it was. It seemed to be a sea fish, but when he saw the fish head and the fish bones, he could only see the fish meat that had been fried to a golden color and piled there. In addition to fish and meat, there were also 2 large pots of salads, 1 pot of fruits, 1 pot of vegetables, and a basket of bread with butter on the side. Such an arrangement would make the traditional rich people unable to eat it at first sight. But to Jiang Hai, this arrangement was more meaningful. The people of Bing City liked to drink big bowls of wine and eat big mouthfuls of meat. They were not used to the stingy way of eating in Jiangnan. Looking at the food in front of him and smelling the aroma, Jiang Hai's appetite was aroused. He did not say anything else and sat down at the table. Jiang Hai picked up a piece of steak with a fork and started eating. When the steak entered his mouth, there was nothing to say. It was delicious. The contract had been signed. From next week onwards, there will be 2 chapters a day. I hope everyone will support Xiao Fei's new book. Chapter 11. The meat was not watery at all. The firm texture of the beef and the slightly musty taste were just right. However, the meat itself was especially tender, making it effortless for you to bite it. With just a bite of the front teeth, you could bite the beef that entered your mouth. Following the texture, it would not stick to your teeth. Instead, it gave off a chewy feeling. Then, the beef entered his back molars and he chewed again. The juicy but not greasy taste, coupled with the beauty of the fresh black pepper, instantly exploded on his taste buds, filling his entire mouth. It made Jiang Hai want to take 2 bites, so he ate 2 bites before he took the next piece. Yes, Jiang Hai ate a piece of the palm-sized steak in 2 to 3 bites. In the eyes of the upper class, eating like this was very rude. However, in Robinsi's eyes, it was Jiang Hai affirming his culinary skills. He was very happy. However, to be honest, Robinsi Garcia's culinary skills could only be described as average. The beef that he made might have been roasted well. After all, he knew that Jiang Hai was Chinese, and Chinese people rarely had the habit of eating raw beef. Therefore, they usually cooked it medium well or at most medium well. However, the beef that he made for Jiang Hai was almost fully cooked. The ratio was slightly worse. Coupled with the more primitive seasonings, the taste could only be described as average. However, it was good that he made beef. In the United States, meat was very cheap. It was the vegetables that were expensive. After all, he was here to invest in a ranch. Therefore, Jiang Hai had a preliminary understanding of the grades of beef in the United States. The beef in the United States was divided into 2 grades, quality and age. According to the marbling, they divided the beef into 8 grades: excellent, selected, preferred, standard, commercial, usable, minced, and canned. According to the time of slaughter, it was further divided into 5 grades, A, B, C, D, E. Grade A referred to cows that were 9 months old to 30 months old. Grade B referred to cows that were 30 months old to 42 months old. Grade C referred to cows that were 42 months old to 72 months old. Grade D referred to cows that were 72 months old to 96 months old. Those that were above 96 months old were Grade E. Basically, all the good beef in the supermarket was Grade A. No one would raise a cow for more than 30 months, unless the bull market this year was not good and there were no sales. However, ever since the United States started to supply beef to Asia, Korea, Japan, and other Asian markets, there was no shortage of stock. At most, they would lower the price. Now, the beef that Jiang Hai was eating was standard beef. It was a special grade beef. This type of beef was not provided to supermarkets or shopping malls. They only provided it to their own specialty stores or to high-class Western restaurants. The best beef that could be bought in the supermarket was the best. However, the best beef was also the most expensive. 1 pound of beef was worth almost $50. It was indeed too expensive. However, under optimization, the prices of standard, commercial, and usable beef were much cheaper. Standard beef cost less than $8 a pound, and commercial beef cost about $5. Usable beef cost $3. Minced and canned beef couldn't be used directly. Minced beef could also be sold as meat fillings, which cost about $1 per kilogram. Finally, canned beef was actually not eaten by American civilians except for those specially supplied to the military. They all bought the canned food to feed their pets and dogs. 1 kilogram of canned food could be sold for 30 to 50 cents at a discount in the supermarket. At its most expensive, it could be sold for about $1. It can be said that eating beef in the United States was very cheap. The beef that Jiang Hai was eating now was standard beef. It was much more delicious than the beef sold in the country. This wasn't because Jiang Hai worshipped foreign goods. The main reason was that the slaughter rate of domestic beef was less than 50%. Compared to the slaughter rate of foreign beef, the slaughter rate of foreign beef was more than 80%. There was a 30% difference. Therefore, in China, this grade of beef was basically specially provided for those steakhouses. Everyone could go to the supermarket to buy beef. The most tender cucumber strips were basically commercial grade in the United States. The lower grade, such as pork brain or sirloin, were basically commercial grade. The cost of living in Boston was quite high, but commercial grade beef, when converted to RMB, was less than 20 yuan per catty. However, in China, it was sold for more than 40 yuan. If the standard grade beef bought in China was more than $40 or $50, it would be sold for $200 to $300 in a domestic steak restaurant. This was the difference. $200 to $300 of beef, as long as it was cooked and there was no strange taste, it was naturally very delicious. Most importantly, the meat was not watered. The quality of the meat was quite good. Jiang Hai tasted the fish on the other side. It was also very delicious. What surprised him the most was that the fish was actually sweet. This is Atlantic cod, one of the economic fish species in the Atlantic Ocean. There used to be plenty of it here. If we want to raise fish in the future, this kind of fish is also indispensable. Seeing Jiang Hai's satisfied gaze, Robbins Garcia said with a smile. Well, this kind of fish is not bad. If we sell it to Huaxia, it will definitely be very popular. Nodding, Jiang Hai said with a serious face. The taste of the fish was very good and very fine. Perhaps because it was a cold water fish, the meat was sweet and there were no bones. After Jiang Hai took a bite, he fell in love with the taste. He thought that with his own ability, the quality of the fish and cattle he raised would probably be better. Thinking of this, he felt that he might be able to recoup his capital in less than 10 years. Hee, this depends on you, boss. We don't have such connections. Basically, when we raise cattle and fish, we sell them directly to the Animal Husbandry Association. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Robbins Garcia chuckled and said to him. In the United States, when you sell cattle and fish, you don't have to look everywhere for a buyer like the people in China. Instead, it's similar to the food in China. When it's time to harvest, people from the government will come and collect it. Of course, if you don't sell it to these people, you can also sell it to some private companies. However, the price offered by the private companies will not be much higher than the government. Sometimes, it's not guaranteed. Therefore, basically, fish farmers and herders would sell their production resources to the country. The country would accept them and classify them. Then, they would sell them according to the standard. They wouldn't let the price of herding be too high. In the United States, corn, wheat, beef, mutton, fish, and so on, daily necessities are basically priced by the United States. The situation is different in different places. The price fluctuates slightly, but it's only a slight fluctuation. As for vegetables that can't be transported long distances, they are very expensive in the United States. A good lettuce is even more expensive than standard beef. This is probably something that people don't understand. However, if you want to see results, selling vegetables is indeed a good method. For example, the vegetables that Jiang Hai is eating now are all planted by Robbins Garcia. He can't bear to go out and buy vegetables. The two of them talked as they ate. Before they knew it, the food on the table was almost finished. Jiang Hai also patted his stomach. To be honest, there's only one word to describe eating here: awesome. Looking at Jiang Hai's satisfied expression, Robbins Garcia hesitated for a moment. Then, he asked Jiang Hai, Mr. Jiang, may I ask, what are your plans after buying this place? After he finished speaking, Robbins Garcia secretly looked at Jiang Hai, afraid that he would hear something different from what he imagined. Hearing Robbins Garcia's words, Jiang Hai thought for a moment and said, I'll probably keep it the same. This large grassland can be used to raise cattle and sheep. The fish farm over there can also be fish. I can also try to brew red wine. Your choice is very wise. The quality of the soil here is excellent, very suitable for cattle breeding. Moreover, the cow shed here is made of reinforced concrete and is very modern. It was left behind by the previous ranch owner. There is no need to rebuild it at all. It only needs to be renovated a little. As for the lawn mower and the like, there is also a complete set of things here. There's also the seaside. The dock is a gravity dock that extends 150 meters into the sea. It can dock fishing boats or cargo ships of the 1,000-ton class. It won't need to be renovated for at least a few decades. Seeing that Jiang Hai really wanted to develop agriculture and animal husbandry, Robbins Garcia immediately said. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also nodded secretly. Originally, even if he didn't want to, he had to develop these. What's more, he was now willing to do so. Therefore, it was already an inevitable trend to develop these. Then, developing these needs people. I don't know, Mr. Jiang, can I stay? After introducing the advantages of this place, Robbins Garcia changed the topic and looked at Jiang Hai cautiously. You? Hearing his words, Jiang Hai was stunned for a moment. Then, he couldn't help but smile. It seemed that this was the biggest purpose of this person. Mr. Jiang, I'm a veteran cowboy. In the Boston area, my standards are obvious to all. I've won cowboy awards in Massachusetts, Maine, and Texas. I've been in this business since I was a child. I've been in this business for 20 years now. As long as you believe in me, I will definitely become your right-hand man. Looking at Jiang Hai, Robbins Garcia began to promote himself. Everyone said that the people in the United States were dull and straightforward. It seemed that they were all bullsh*t. Wasn't he also quite scheming? Hearing Robbins Garcia's words, although Jiang Hai felt that it was funny, his mind was thinking about what Robbins Garcia said. He was right. He did need to find some people to help him. Whether it was a cowboy, a fisherman, or a winemaker, he would look for them all. He wasn't sure if he would be fooled if he looked for them. Robbins Garcia was able to gain Philip's trust and let him manage this place for all these years. This proved that there should be no problem with this person's character. Strength could be measured slowly in the future, but character was the most important. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai couldn't help but nod. It's not a big problem. What's your current salary? Chapter 12. Don't think that the U.S. residents' lives are better than China. Yes, they earn U.S. dollars, but they also spend U.S. dollars. Except for food like kaifeng, which was indeed much cheaper than huaxia, other things were also quite expensive. And their income, according to the current domestic standards, was actually not that much. Other than businessmen and capitalists, there were also those who earned a fixed salary. Someone had done a survey and selected 200 common professions in the United States. Among them, the professions that earned the most on average were petroleum engineers, mathematicians, pharmacists, astrologers, internet sales managers, doctors, space engineers, lawyers, and air traffic controllers. These people earned more than $100,000 a year. Among them, the professions that earned the most were doctors, who earned $180,000 a year. This was also why doctors had such a high status in the United States and were so impressive. It could be said that every doctor was an absolute high-income group. Of course, this was also the same in China. Although the doctors' salaries were not much, but the bonuses, medical supplements, and equipment manufacturers were enough to make people envious. Jiang Hai had a friend who was 2 years younger than him. His friend had joined a tertiary grade A hospital as a nurse. He worked in the operating room and then the emergency department for 5 years. His family did not have much money, but he bought 3 properties in Bing City and exchanged 2 cars for 300,000 renminbi each. According to his friend, people like him were only taking a small portion of the profits. Those who were at the same level as him or the head nurse could earn tens of millions or even hundreds of millions a year. As for the rumors about red packets, they were not interested in them. A red packet was worth 300 to 500 renminbi, at most 1,000 renminbi, and they would be scolded behind their backs. For example, an imported steel plate used in orthopedics. The original price was 5,000 renminbi, and the hospitals sold it for 25,000 renminbi. The remaining 20,000 renminbi, other than the hospitals, belonged to them. They could earn 6,000 to 7,000 renminbi per cent. As for the medical supplements, the doctors would tell you that the effects were not good and there were side effects. If you still wanted to use it, they would still give it to you. But under such circumstances, who would insist on using such drugs? But this group of people keeps saying they are poor, and Jiang Hai can't do anything about it other than giving them the middle finger. In the US, the gray income is much lower. This is because if you pay your personal income tax, you do not need to spend a single cent. Of course, if you do not pay your medical insurance, you will be in trouble. If the US doctors do not charge you a few thousand US dollars for a cold, it will be unfair to you. The US doctor's income is very high. The average annual income is 180,000 US dollars. Among all the professions in the US, this is the highest. A lawyer's annual income is only 110,000 US dollars. Of course, this has nothing to do with Jiang Hai and Robbins. A family farm owner's annual income is only 69,000 US dollars. As a cowboy, he can't earn that much. To put it bluntly, a cowboy is still doing manual labor. Their salary is about the same as lumberjacks, dock workers, and construction workers. They don't even earn as much as some skilled construction workers. The income of these people is between 20,000 to 30,000 US dollars a year. Robin's previous income is calculated on a weekly basis. He gets 616 US dollars a week, so his annual income is 32,000 US dollars. This is considered a good income for a cowboy in the US. After all, the income of the middle class here is only 50,000 US dollars a year. The income of the seafarers is slightly higher. The income of the fishermen on the ocean-going fishing boats is about 50,000 US dollars a year. They are considered the middle class in the US. However, the fishermen near the sea can't do that. Their income is basically the same as the cowboy. After Jiang Hai heard Robin's words, he did some calculations and decided to hire him. The weekly salary is increased to 800 US dollars, which is a little more than 40,000 US dollars a year. This is a good income for him. Robbins was very excited when he heard that Jiang Hai agreed to hire him. He immediately told Jiang Hai happily. When Jiang Hai heard this, he realized that it seems that running a ranch is not as simple as it seems in novels. First of all, because the other party took away all the things in the ranch, he now needs to renovate his place. This depends on Jiang Hai's own requirements. It can be simple, complicated, or luxurious. It all depends on Jiang Hai's own ideas. Second, he needs to recruit people. It is impossible for Jiang Hai and Robbins to run a ranch and a fishing ground, so recruiting people is necessary. The number of people recruited is related to the number of cattle Jiang Hai wants to raise. According to domestic cattle raising, 100 mu can raise 60 cattle. There are 12,000 mu here, which is 72,000 mu. It is not a problem to raise 40,000 cattle. However, Jiang Hai is not going to raise so many at once. He is going to raise 10,000 cattle to play with. He will not forget that he wants to raise premium cattle, not ordinary beef cattle. 10,000 cows would require at least 5 cowboys and enough cattle dogs to fend them off. Therefore, they would have to recruit another 5 people. Secondly, the fishing ground also needs manpower. If he wants to operate a 100-ton fishing boat, he needs at least 3 people. Usually, someone needs to drive the boat to patrol. It is basically a group of 2 people. In this case, the fishermen need 5 people. There is also the wine manor behind, but he doesn't need to care too much about it because the best planting season for the grapes in the wine manor is early spring and early autumn. Although it is winter now, Boston is located in the north after all, and there will be blizzards. In this case, the grapes can't grow, and they are easy to die, so the winemaker can be found next year. However, the winemaker needs at least 3 people. In this case, he has to find at least 12 more people to help. With the people, he has to solve the transportation problem. Then he has to buy a car. With a car, he can get on track to buy cattle, sheep, horses, and at the same time, he needs to buy a boat, then he needs to buy fish seedlings, net cages, and so on. Listening to what Robin said to him, Jiang Hai regretted buying this place. He didn't feel anything about these things. This time, he found so many things for him to do. Boss, don't worry, I will help you. These things will be done one by one, and it will be almost done in half a month. As if seeing Jiang Hai's embarrassment, Robbins chuckled. It seems that his new boss really doesn't understand. Hee, that's the only way. With a slightly embarrassed smile, Jiang Hai also whispered. The next day, he took the car that Anthony specially drove to pick him up and went to the Phillips office in Boston. He needs to officially sign there to buy this ranch. Of course, in addition, he has to apply for a green card. It's not easy for ordinary people to apply for a green card in the United States. They have to line up, check their qualifications, and so on. It's quite troublesome, but Jiang Hai wants to apply for a green card. It's really not a very troublesome thing. Because he is an investment immigrant, and he is investing in a large livestock, fishing, and wine estate worth $280 million. It can solve the work problems of more than 10 people for the country, and it can even hire people when farming and fishing are busy. For such an investor, the U.S. government is very welcoming, especially Jiang Hai. First, he is not a fugitive, and second, he is not a political asylum seeker. Such an investor, the U.S. government naturally hopes to have as many as possible. So as soon as Jiang Hai finished signing, the other party directly passed the review and let Jiang Hai get permanent residency. However, the validity period of this thing still needs to wait in China. It doesn't matter. Anyway, Jiang Hai really needs to go back to China. Although his parents are gone, he still needs to deal with the things that should be dealt with. But before he goes back to China, he still needs to do one thing, and that is to find a renovation company to deal with his villa first. Now, it's so empty, like a haunted house. He is not used to living in it. All the walls are repainted, covered with wooden boards, installed with geothermal heat, the bedroom and kitchen are covered with tiles, and bought a bathtub, toilet, bedding, wardrobe, refrigerator, all kinds of cooking things, oven, stove, and so on. Jiang Hai follows the drawings designed by the renovation company, and the other party provides the materials and materials. Just the renovation of his villa cost Jiang Hai $1.2 million. This made the other party very happy. This is definitely a big price in the United States. After everything is done, Jiang Hai got on the plane back to Huaxia. As for the problem here, it is handed over to Luo Binci. Of course, this is also a test given by Jiang Hai. If this guy doesn't look carefully, or if he messes up this matter, it proves that this person is not trustworthy. Jiang Hai can change people at any time. Fortunately, Luo Binci wasn't stupid. After Jiang Hai handed over this matter to him, he naturally looked at these people very seriously. If a tile wasn't good enough, he wouldn't agree to it. Luo Binci, since he is paid, he naturally needs to do a good job. Luo Binci Garcia did a good job on this. But at this time, Jiang Hai doesn't know this. He only knows that when he comes back, Luo Binci should have already renovated the house. He can ignore the process. What he needs to know is the result. After staying in the fish farm for 2 days, Jiang Hai left his new fish farm and came to Boston. He took a plane to Los Angeles, then changed planes there and flew directly back to Huaxia. Maybe it is because the card is really useful. Jiang Hai's plane is the best one. This plane is completely different from the domestic passenger planes he has taken before. Not only is there a bar and restaurant on the plane, but the ordinary economy cabin also has a separate touchscreen TV. The best one Jiang Hai bought is naturally more comfortable. Not only is there a luxurious leather recliner similar to a small bed, but there is also a separate room on the second floor of the plane. He has never taken such a plane before. When he came, there was only one bed. Who would have thought that there is a room when he goes back? Next week, I think I will be naked, sob 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 sob. Chapter 13. Damn, no wonder it's so comfortable. A ticket back costs $47,000. Why don't you go rob a bank? No, this is much faster than robbing. Jiang Hai had already booked a 5-star hotel when he returned to Imperial Airport. The hotel's car was already waiting for him outside the airport. When he came out, the car picked him up and brought him back to the hotel. In the hotel, he used his mobile phone to check his balance. Well, this was Jiang Hai's favorite thing to do recently. He had no choice. After being a loser for so many years, he suddenly had so much money. If he didn't listen to it a few times a day, he would feel that it was fake. Before he set off, he had $332,045,211, of which $330 million came from selling the pink diamond, and the remaining $2 million came from selling other gems. In the end, he had $45,211, or more than 284,800 yuan, of which more than 150,000 came from selling the flowers, more than 100,000 came from selling the crystals, and the last 10,000 yuan was what he had saved up before. It was quite sad when he thought about it. He was an adult, but he only had so little money left after selling his house. Thinking about what happened to his family a year ago, Jiang Hai couldn't help but sigh. In just a month's time, at least he had undergone earth-shaking changes. The Jiang Hai of a month ago and the Jiang Hai now were two different people. Forget it. What's the use of thinking so much? I'll go back to Bing City tomorrow and visit my parents first. Then I'll buy the house and meet up with my brothers. It'll be troublesome to come back after I go there. He slapped his forehead to get rid of the melancholy feeling in his mind. A person's life was like a plant's autumn. All he wanted was to be happy. He felt a chill just thinking about it. He was not one of those gigolos from ancient times. Even if he was living in purgatory, he would still find a paradise in such a life. What's more, he was rich now. He did not think too much about it and went straight to sleep. The next morning, the receptionist called to wake him up. After washing up and having a meal downstairs, he boarded the plane again and headed to Bing City. When he landed at Bing City's airport, it was noon. He took a taxi to his favorite restaurant and ate Bing City's famous double-cooked pork slices. After that, he went to the crematorium. Because his parents had passed away in a hurry, he did not have time to buy a grave for his parents. He could only place their graves here. Although he was not short of money now and could buy the best grave for his parents, the Chinese were particular. Since his parents' graves were placed here, they would have to wait for 3 years before they could move their graves. It had only been 1 year, and there was no need to rush. After he paid respects to his parents' graves and baked some paper, he hailed a taxi and went straight home. However, at this time, another family was living in this place. A year ago, Jiang Hai and his mother sold this house to a young man who had just gotten married. At that time, they had no choice. But now that they had money, he must get this house back. When he knocked on the door, a woman holding a child appeared at the door. The woman seemed to be about the same age as Jiang Hai. The child in her arms seemed to be only a few months old. He didn't expect that after not seeing her for a year, the child had already been born. "Hello, how can I help you?" The woman opened the door. When she saw Jiang Hai, she was stunned for a moment. She still had some impression of Jiang Hai. But why did the previous owner come here? Looking at the woman's shocked expression, Jiang Hai hesitated for a moment. It was not easy to say. "Honey, who is it?" At this moment, a man wearing an apron came out of the inner room. When he saw Jiang Hai, the man was stunned for a moment. Seeing the couple, Jiang Hai smiled and nodded. He mustered up his courage. No matter what, he must buy back his family's house. Even if he had to spend more money, it was inevitable. For him, this house was not just a simple house. It was also where his and his parents' memories were. Although some people would sometimes deliberately forget these things, Jiang Hai would not. The conversation that followed was relatively smooth. Jiang Hai's house was an old building. It was a 1.5 bedroom house. The building area was only 48 square meters. The living area had been modified, and the kitchen had been moved to the balcony, so the living area was 40 square meters. According to the average price of 8,000 yuan, 48 square meters is only 380,000 yuan. When the young couple bought this house, they only spent 360,000 yuan. There was no other way. At that time, Jiang Hai's family was very anxious to spend money. But now, Jiang Hai was back, and he would not cheat this couple. Currently, the property prices in China were still very expensive in some first-tier cities. But in Bing City, the prices did not go up. Jiang Hai had bought this house for 600,000 renminbi, and the other party would surely want this windfall. Therefore, the conversation was still very pleasant. To them, it was just a little troublesome to move, but the 600,000 was enough for them to buy a large 2-bedroom apartment to live in. To them, this was an undeniably good thing. So, the conversation was very pleasant. After signing the agreement verbally, both of them agreed to settle the transfer procedures tomorrow. After the procedures were completed, they moved out within 10 days. As for where they would be staying, they could stay at his mother-in-law's house or his boyfriend's house. Anyway, it was not that they did not want to buy a house. It was just a temporary residence, and it was not troublesome. After finalizing the details of the house, Jiang Hai breathed a sigh of relief. The first thing he did when he came back was done. After leaving his house, he looked at the time on his mobile phone. His friends should have gotten off work. Thinking of this, he could not help but pick up the phone and make a call. After a while, a slightly dull voice came from the phone. Hello? Listening to the familiar voice on the phone, Jiang Hai could not help but chuckle. Hello, are you still not up yet? It's getting dark. On the other side of the phone, Jiang Hai could not help but shout. Huh? This number, damn, Jiang Hai, where have you been recently? Why are you so quiet? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the other side paused for a few seconds before responding. Then, he could not help but curse at the other side of the phone. Huh, I've made a fortune. Don't sleep anymore, get up quickly. I'll call the other animals for dinner tonight. Hearing the voice on the other side of the phone, Jiang Hai said with a smile. You piece of shit, wait for me, I'll wash my face first. Where are you? Do you need me to pick you up? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the other side of the phone also scolded with a smile. Then, his tone was filled with a different kind of laughter. I'm at my house, hurry up. Hearing the voice on the other side of the phone, Jiang Hai said and then hung up the phone. Then, he picked up the phone and called the other people. About 10 minutes later, an ordinary minivan stopped in front of Jiang Hai. The window rolled down, and a familiar smiling face appeared in front of Jiang Hai. Damn, where the hell have you been recently? Get in the car. Hearing the familiar words, Jiang Hai smiled and sat in the front passenger seat. Didn't I tell you, I've made a fortune? I've made a fortune. Looking at this familiar bad friend, Jiang Hai said with a smug face. Don't talk nonsense. You've disappeared for almost 2 months, where have you been? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, it was obvious that this person didn't believe him. He looked at Jiang Hai with a face full of disdain. Hearing what he said, Jiang Hai also laughed. When everyone is here, I'll tell you. Seeing that Jiang Hai didn't want to talk about it now, this person didn't care. After all, they were very familiar friends, so there was no need to be so estranged. He changed gears and asked Jiang Hai, where are we going now? Barbecue in the secret room. Let's go for skewers. Pointing forward, Jiang Hai said happily. As the car engine started, it did not take long for the van to drive to the door of a small barbecue mutton skewers shop. At this time, there were several cars parked in front of the shop. Looking at these familiar cars, the two did not say much. After parking the car, they walked into the shop. As soon as they entered, they saw 3 young people sitting around a table playing with their mobile phones. Damn, you're still alive, kid? I thought you were doing something. There was no news for 2 months. Walking behind the 3 people, Jiang Hai went up and slapped the person sitting outside on the back. Although the sound was loud, he did not use any strength. This person was shocked. When he turned around and saw that it was Jiang Hai, he turned around and gave him a middle finger. Sit down quickly. I'm waiting for you to order. I ordered 20 beef tendons, 20 plum meat, 10 kidneys, 10 chicken wings, and a pot of tripe. It's probably not enough. I'm quite hungry. What else do you want to order? Hearing this person's words, the other people also raised their heads. After seeing Jiang Hai, the shortest person threw the menu over and said anxiously, "Boss, when did you not say that you were quite hungry? How much can you eat after ordering?" Hearing this person's words, the other person said to him with a smile. Hearing this, the boss couldn't help but give this guy a punch. "It's okay. I'm also hungry. Whatever I can't eat is mine." Looking at the appearance of his brothers, Jiang Hai laughed. He took the menu and looked at it. He ordered a grilled squid, a grilled cod, 20 plum meat skewers, 10 chicken hearts, and 10 chicken gizzards before he stopped. 100 skewers for 5 people. It was more than enough to eat. Not to mention, they also wanted to eat toasted bread and dumpling soup. Jiang Hai laughed and looked at the menu. After ordering, everyone sat at the table and joked with each other. "Kid, where have you been recently? You didn't even send a letter. I thought you were killed by Chi Li's ex-boyfriend. Today's update will be updated in the morning tomorrow. After 12 o'clock, it will be the first update the day after tomorrow. Then the day after tomorrow will be the third update. The rest of the week will be the second update. Please support and collect more. Current collection 250. Chapter 14. Kid, where have you been recently? You didn't even send a letter. I thought you were silenced by Chi Li's ex-boyfriend." Looking at Jiang Hai, the person called boss just now said to Jiang Hai with a face full of displeasure. "I asked him just now, he said that he would talk about it when everyone is here." Hearing boss's words, the person who just drove to pick him up also said. Hearing these people's words, Jiang Hai thought for a while and decided to make up a story. He wasn't going to tell anyone that he had dragon balls and dragon patterns on his body. He wasn't going to tell anyone, not even his future wife. This was a secret that only he knew, a secret that he was going to take into his coffin. But in his current situation, he had to make up a lie. "I was in a bad mood a while ago. I just finished burning my mother's anniversary, so I decided to go out and play. Then I picked up some stones in the Gobi Desert over at the Blue Sea." Looking at the few friends in front of him, Jiang Hai slowly made up a story. In fact, the story is quite simple. He picked up some stones and these stones turned out to be very valuable. After he came back, he sold them to the auction house. One of them was worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Then he used this money to buy a large farming, livestock, fishing, and wine estate in the United States. He just signed the contract and applied for the green card. He came back to wait for the green card to take effect. "Your face isn't red, you didn't drink and you drank too much?" Hearing Jiang Hai's story, the few people here looked at him hesitantly. They were surprised. This guy didn't drink and he drank too much? Is there a mistake? "Cough, you drank too much, I'm telling the truth, this is the green card." Jiang Hai looked at the appearance of the few people and couldn't help but glare at them, then he slapped the green card on the table. These people all gathered around. They had only heard of the green card before, but they had never seen it before. In fact, the full name of the green card is the Permanent Residence Permit for Foreign Population. At present, there are also such green cards in China. It was similar to a temporary ID card. The front of the card was green, and there were 3 lines of numbers at the bottom. On the left was a picture of the person, and next to the picture was the person's information. On the right was a fingerprint. In fact, Jiang Hai had never seen a green card before. He had only seen it a few days ago. Looking at Jiang Hai's green card, although these buddies didn't recognize it, it looked very real. They couldn't help but look at Jiang Hai with a different gaze. From the initial suspicion, they became somewhat curious. "You brat, your luck is too good. You just randomly picked up some stones and you had such a fortuitous encounter. I didn't think that you would be the first one to get rich among us brothers. In the end, after being silent for a long time, the person who had received him couldn't help but say in a strange tone. Hee hee, my luck is here. Do you think you can stop it? After putting away the green card, Jiang Hai said with a smug expression. No, I must make you bleed tonight. Waiter, give me 10 more skewers of kidney. Looking at Jiang Hai's smug face, the boss couldn't help but shout. Okay, no problem. Order as much as you want. I'll make you vomit today. Looking at the people in front of him, Jiang Hai said with a smile. Jiang Hai didn't have a complicated background, so his friends weren't complicated at all. He had never believed that he would have a protagonist's life. The main reason was that among his friends, there weren't any famous third generation, the second generation of rich businessmen, but there were people who lived in anonymity. He was just an ordinary person, and his friends were also friends. The person who had just received him was called Su Wei, his high school classmate. His family was very ordinary. His father passed away in high school. His mother had taken care of him for so many years, and the family didn't have much savings. Relying on the family's relocation, they got 2 houses, so they didn't have to worry about a place to live in the future. After graduating from high school, he didn't go to college, but went straight to find a job. So many years had passed, and he didn't have any skills. Naturally, he couldn't make much money. Later, someone introduced him to a small van 2 years ago. The van was used to transport workers to the construction site. If the work was good, he could earn about 200 renminbi a day. If the work was bad, he had to stay at home. If the work was good, he could earn about 5,000 renminbi a month. But because Bing City was located in the northern part of the country, once it snowed in late autumn, the construction site would not be able to start construction. Every year, he would have to stay at home for at least 5 months. This way, he could not really earn money. He could barely make ends meet. The person Jiang Hai beat up just now was called Huang Yunfei, his childhood friend. He was 1 year younger than Jiang Hai and grew up with Jiang Hai. Naturally, they were very close. Huang Yunfei lived behind Jiang Hai's building. His father was a section chief in the logistics department of a hospital near Jiang Hai's house. Although he was a section chief, and it felt like he was making a lot of money, he was mainly in charge of cleaning and landscaping. In other words, he was in charge of cleaning and cleaning. There were no profits, and he couldn't make much money from his fixed salary. Huang Yunfei also didn't have any interest in studying. After he graduated from university, his father paid him to work at the cashier's office. He was just a small fry and didn't make much money. At least, that was the case now. Of the 2 people sitting on the other side, the eldest was called Fu Yuan, Jiang Hai's junior high school classmate. Because his family valued him very much, he had to repeat a year before he became Jiang Hai's classmate. However, because he was 1 year older, he was also the leader of this group of people. His father was a section chief of the university's security department. There were a total of 5 people, and they were responsible for campus disputes. The security guards at the gate were not under his father's control. The only advantage was that he was familiar with them. In the university, his family also opened a dry cleaning shop and a copy shop. His family was the best among these people, but they were not rich. The last one was called Xiang Hua. He was also Jiang Hai's junior high school classmate. He studied art and was currently his father-in-law's driver. He was also the only person here who was married except for Jiang Hai. However, his wife was different from Jiang Hai. Although the woman was strong, his wife's family only opened a small machinery factory. The total assets were only 1,800,000 yuan. His wife was really good to him. His father-in-law was also good to him. Therefore, it was impossible for him to be a driver. These 4 people could be regarded as Jiang Hai's best friends. Jiang Hai loved to make friends when he was young, but since he went to university, his friends were decreasing day by day. He had no interest in those outsiders. As for the later incident in his family and after he got married, there were only these 4 people left who were still in contact with him. However, it also proved that the relationship between these 5 people was indeed strong. After waiting for a while, the waiter served the kebabs they ordered. Jiang Hai and the others also began to eat. When it came to barbecued skewers, the first place that came to everyone's mind was Enchanting province or Inner Mongolia. After all, they produced mutton and ate barbecued skewers, so the barbecued skewers there should be the best. In fact, this was not the case. According to Jiang Hai's taste, the kebabs tasted the best in Bing City. Of course, this was also related to the different tastes of different places. But basically, even the southerners rarely said that the kebabs in Bing City were not delicious, except for the salty kebabs. Of course, it was inevitable that they could not stand the big kidneys. Inner Mongolia's kebabs were indeed famous. Whether it was the whole kebabs or the kebabs, they were all delicious. Jiang Hai also admitted that. But other kebabs were not good. For example, chicken wings, dumpling soup, honey plum meat, etc. Inner Mongolia's kebabs were not delicious. Enchanting province's kebabs were similar to Inner Mongolia's kebabs. This was also the reason why Jiang Hai liked to eat kebabs in Bing City. As the kebabs were served, Jiang Hai and the others also began to gobble up the kebabs. Since Jiang Hai was possessed by the Dragon Ball, he found that while his physical fitness improved, his appetite also increased. For example, in the past, he could eat about 20 kebabs. But now, he could not even eat 30 kebabs. He could even eat 40 or 50 kebabs. Thinking back to when he was in Boston, Robbins made a 10-pound steak, and Jiang Hai ate more than half of it. Eating kebabs in Bing City was naturally not bad. 100 kebabs were not enough, so they added another 30 kebabs before they were full. When it was time to settle the bill, Jiang Hai had spent more than 500 renminbi for the barbecue. It was indeed a lot. There were only 5 of them, and this amount of food was considered a big eater in Bing City. What are we going to do now? We can't go back home after having a meal. After paying, Fu Yuan looked at his phone. It was only 6 p.m. It was the time to play. What should they do now? Sing? Or find a place to play mahjong? The others were very interested when they heard about playing mahjong. Sing. I am going to take a bath. I have not bathed for 2 months. I am about to turn into a clay figurine. But Jiang Hai waved his hand and rejected their suggestions. Compared to singing and playing mahjong, he was more willing to take a bath. Fine. Let's go. As soon as they heard Jiang Hai's words, these people couldn't help but laugh. Then they walked out of the store. No one drank, so they drove their own cars and went to the bathing center that they often went to. The bathhouse wasn't big, but for Jiang Hai and the others, it was very affordable. 39 yuan package, bathing, rubbing, salting, steaming, and resting in the lobby. They could also choose between foot massage, cupping, and health massage. They had to admit that this was a very suitable price. In the past, Jiang Hai and the others often came here. Now, when they talk about taking a bath, this was the first place they thought of. So, they drove straight to this bathing center. They ordered 539 renminbi packages and entered the bathing center. Today's update will be updated after 12 p.m. After all, I had signed the contract. Please support me and help me get on the new book list. Thank you. Chapter 15. Hua. With a few splashes, a few naked men stepped into a clear, warm pool, and then slowly sat down. They leaned against the wall while enjoying themselves while watching the TV hanging on the opposite wall. Bathing in the north and the south had 2 completely different concepts. In the south, there were bathhouses in the beginning, but bathhouses disappeared decades ago because there was no shortage of water there. It was not particularly cold in winter. At least, people would not freeze to death easily. Instead of spending money to bathe in the bathhouse, it was better to boil some water and bathe at home. They could bathe whenever they wanted. It was very convenient. So gradually, bathhouses disappeared in the South. Now, bathhouses in the South basically had special services. Of course, some of them really went to bathe, but it was not clear if 5 out of 100 people could be chosen. So when a Northerner said to a Southerner that he was going to take a bath in the bathhouse, the Southerner's first impression was that he was going to talk nonsense instead of really taking a bath. But in fact, this person was really going to take a bath. In the North, the places where people talked nonsense were basically places like massaging, washing their hair, and massaging their feet. In the North, winter was too cold, and ordinary people did not have the conditions to easily take a bath at home. So, bathhouses had never disappeared. As people enjoyed bathing in bathhouses more and more, there were also many bathhouse cultures in the bathhouses. For example, soaking in the pool, rubbing, back patting, salt pushing, and so on. These were the more distinctive features of the bathhouses in the North. In some provinces and cities in the South, there was even no such thing as a bath towel. They were more likely to take a bath towel and rub it directly. In the eyes of the Northerners, it was obviously not clean. Over the years, the Northerners had long been accustomed to bathing in bathhouses, even if every household now had a water heater. In summer, it was hot, so they had to take a shower at home every day. In winter, they had to take a shower every 2 or 3 days. However, this could not stop them from having the urge to take a shower in the bathhouse every 10 days or half a month. Jiang Hai is a pure Northerner from Bing City. That's why he likes to bathe. Bing City is located in Heilong Province, which is rich in water resources. Out of the top 5 rivers in the country, Heilong Province owns 2 of them. The first is Yangtze River and the second is Yellow River. But the third is Heishui River and the fourth is Songshui River. Songshui River even passes by Bing City. That's why Bing City did not have a water shortage in the north. The water resources here were very developed. If not, Bing City would not have become the country's granary. Therefore, under the influence of his parents, Jiang Hai liked to take baths since he was young. As for soaking in the pool, it seemed that there wasn't a boy who didn't like to soak in it. Jiang Hai let out a long breath, picked up the tea that he had specially asked for, and took a sip. Are you going to develop in the US in the future? Seeing Jiang Hai enjoying himself, Fu Yuan also took a sip and asked. Well, if there are no accidents, I will develop there. Hearing what Fu Yuan said, Jiang Hai nodded gently. He has invested so much money there. If he doesn't develop there, wouldn't it be a pity? Besides, that's the US. There are plenty of Caucasian women there. At this time, Xiang Hua raised his eyebrows and said, Damn, you have been suppressed by your wife at home. When you mention the US, the first thing you think of is Caucasian women? Is that a specialty? Looking at Xiang Hua, Su Wei gave him a middle finger and said with a face full of contempt. That's right, what's so good about Caucasian women? With Jiang Hai's number 8 screw, can it be screwed into a number 16 nut? At this time, Huang Yuanfei also swam over with a smile and said with a face full of malice. Damn, you dare to look down on my 22 centimeters swing stick? Hearing Huang Yuanfei's words, Jiang Hai also spat at him and said with a face full of anger. These words used to be taken lightly, but recently, Jiang Hai found that his swing stick seems to have developed again. While his physical fitness is getting stronger, his body is also slowly changing. Originally, Jiang Hai's height was 186 meters, but recently, he seems to have grown taller again. It's really unscientific. Damn, if you have a 22 centimeters swing stick, how can your wife live in the capital? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Fu Yuan also said with a smile on his face. This group of bad friends is really not shy at all when talking about these dirty things. She didn't give me a chance to show off and ran away. Giving Fu Yuan a middle finger, Jiang Hai said with a face full of contempt. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, everyone laughed, and the slightly solemn atmosphere just now was also diluted a lot. If you have time in the future, come and play with me. You will pay for the plane tickets, and I will pay for the food and accommodation. Looking at the crowd in front of him, Jiang Hai said slowly. In fact, for him now, even if he pays for the plane tickets of these brothers, it doesn't matter. But he knows a saying, it's called gratitude for a small amount of rice, hatred for a dough of rice. Moreover, he doesn't get along with these friends like in society. They play together and communicate with each other. Even if he wants to take all of it, these people won't agree. You said it, when we have time, we will team up and play with the local tycoons. Hearing Jiang Hai's promise, everyone said with a smile. Of course. Looking at everyone's smiling face, Jiang Hai also said with a smile. Then, everyone deliberately changed the topic. After taking a shower, everyone went to the hall to have a massage. Jiang Hai and the others often come here, so naturally, they know that the massage here, whether it is cupping or foot massaging, are all male technicians, only the healthcare is female. But the healthcare women here are all very, environmentally friendly. There are some abnormal places, when massaging during healthcare, the massage will go astray, but this massage is really done. Of course, this does not exclude the fact that these women's faces are very uninteresting. After the massage, everyone went to the steaming room. While steaming, they played chess and watched TV. After 10:00 in the evening, everyone dispersed. As for Jiang Hai, he directly booked a room upstairs and stayed here for the night. The next day, he followed the family he talked to yesterday and went to the housing management office to transfer the ownership, but the transfer time is 10 days later. Jiang Hai still has to wait here for 10 days, but he has waited for so long, so he doesn't mind waiting for a few more days. It just so happened that he wanted to have some fun with his buddies for the next few days. He booked a room in a nearby 3-star hotel and stayed there. For the next 10 days, everyone gathered almost every night. Because the first day was too sudden, all of them drove. For the next few days, no one drove. This can be considered as a farewell dinner for Jiang Hai. Everyone took turns to be the host, and everyone had a good time. Bing City has 3 special features. First, the ice lantern. Every year, the ice lantern is the biggest symbol of this city. Second, the food. Ice cream and bread. Although Bing City's locals like to eat Meadows popsicles, they are not interested in Dalieba's specialty bread. But Dalieba's fermented beverage, kvass, tastes good. But there are 2 types of kvass in the market. One is Wahaha's, which is fake. Although it is popular, the taste is not good, and Bing City's locals do not drink it. For example, Jiang Hai and his friends drink Chulins. Chulins is the only one that tastes good. It is not as sweet, and the fragrance of the bread can be retained perfectly. Drinking it will not only quench the thirst, but also fill the hunger. Third, beer. Bing City's beer is China's earliest beer manufacturer and also China's earliest beer brand. Because of the quality of the water and the quality of the crops, Bing City's beer has always tasted good. But in the past, Bing City's beer did not sell well. Even in China, Green Island and Yendu, Bing City's beer is not popular. Even in China, Bing City's beer is not as popular as Snow's beer. But the real Bing City's residents still like to drink Bing City's beer. Even Snow's beer sold in Bing City is different from overseas. Jiang Hai and his friends like to drink beer. But when they are overseas, they can only drink dark beer. To be honest, Jiang Hai does not like dark beer and white beer. Dark beer is too expensive. It's like adding coffee to beer. White beer is even more expensive. It's like adding brandy to beer. Since they are still in Bing City, let's drink. As for Bing City's other specialty, beauties. Cough. Beauties can only be seen from afar. The girls from the Northeast, or more accurately, Bing City's girls, are very hot-tempered. If you treat them as your specialty, they will beat you up. What? Hit back? Then it will be interesting if they hit back. They will report you to the police for harassment. Girls from other places are gentle and weak. But in Bing City, there are only a few girls with such personalities. Happy times always pass quickly. At least, this is what Jiang Hai thinks. More than 10 days passed in the blink of an eye. Feng Yu had been eating and drinking every day, and the days passed quickly. As his house fell back under his name, although he now had a green card in the United States, don't forget that his nationality was still Huaxia. A green card was different from a change of nationality, so his house was still his. When the house was confirmed, and Jiang Hai bought all the things he needed to buy and packed up, the time limit of his green card was up. He said goodbye to his buddies and told them that they could go to Boston to play with him in the future. Jiang Hai got on a plane and flew from Bing City to Daidu. He bought the most expensive ticket in Daidu and flew to the US. Just like when he came to Bing City, there are no direct flights from Huaxia to Boston. He needs to stop at San Francisco, Los Angeles, or Chicago. When Feng Yu stepped into his villa again, the villa in front of him had changed completely. From today onwards, there will be 2 updates a day. This is the first chapter of the day. It's for those who want to get into the rankings. The other 2 chapters will be updated in the afternoon. Chapter 16. Boss, what do you think of this place? Sitting in the driver's seat, Robbins Garcia said with a smile. I watched them build it from the beginning. The roof, the door, and the pillars were all added by me. We spent $1.2 million, so we can't just renovate the inside. Everything has to be ready. TSK, to be honest, if you hadn't transferred the money, I wouldn't have let them earn $1.2 million so easily. Looking at Jiang Hai, the corners of Robbins Garcia's mouth curled up unconsciously, and then he said proudly. What kind of game is this? Sitting in the passenger seat, Jiang Hai looked at the building in front of him. At this time, he didn't know what to say. The villa in front of him was originally a very simple Western-style 2.5-story villa. The attic above was not included. The 2-story Western-style villa with a steeple covered a large area. It was indeed beautiful when matched with the grassland and beach behind it. At least it looked very harmonious. Therefore, when he originally renovated it, he decorated it according to this standard. The things inside had to be done better, but the exterior didn't need to be changed. However, it seemed that Robbins Garcia wasn't prepared to let his boss live in such a plain room, so he told the repairman over there. The current building was really. It gave Jiang Hai a fright. At this time, the construction in front of him was still the same, the bottom of the 2-story villa, but he didn't know what Luo Binci was thinking. He actually changed the roof. Not only did he make the roof higher, but he also painted red and green like ancient Chinese buildings. Then, he raised several corners of the house. The most important thing was that outside the house, he even made a few red pillars to push up the extra corners of the eaves, forcibly pushing up the roof and a corridor. Luo Binci didn't know what Luo Binci was thinking. In this way, there might not be any 3-dimensional feeling. If there were some slightly old-fashioned schools near your house, the main teaching building of the school would be the same as Jiang Hai's villa now. The only thing that could be said was that it was slightly shorter and bigger than a regular school building, and there was an additional corridor. I specially went to check out the architecture of Huaxia and requested this from the construction team. I have to say, the architectural features of Huaxia are really beautiful. Looking at the house in front of him, Luo Binci didn't feel anything wrong at all. He still said to Jiang Hai with a smile. At this time, Jiang Hai really had nothing but shame. At the thought that he was going to live here, he felt his heart beat a few times for no reason. How shameful. He didn't expect that after trying to get rid of the school for so many years, he ended up living in a teaching building. It was really ironic. However, he couldn't say that Robbins was wrong. After all, Robbins was flattering him, but he seemed to have flattered the horse's leg. Robbins may have seen that Jiang Hai's interest was not high, so he stopped talking. In his opinion, Jiang Hai should be very happy when the house was built like this. Now, he couldn't understand the situation. Forget it. Let's go in and see later. With a long sigh, Jiang Hai smiled at Robbins. Regardless of the appearance, he would go and see the interior decoration in a while. He only hoped that this guy would not decorate the interior according to the ancient style of Huaxia. He couldn't bear it. Oh, okay. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Robbins also stepped on the accelerator, and the car drove faster toward the villa. When the car stopped in front of the villa, Jiang Hai glanced inside the villa. It could be seen that Robbins was still quite thoughtful. Originally, there was a road from the gate of the manor to the front of the villa, but it had been in disrepair for a long time. It was full of weeds and the like. But this time, Robbins deliberately asked the engineering team to repair it. He did not waste the remaining materials. He built a small open-air parking lot in front of the villa. In fact, there was a parking lot in the basement of the villa. But that was used to park the owner's car here, and the parking lot outside could be used to park the guests' cars. There were a total of 16 parking spaces, which was almost enough. After all, Jiang Hai was not going to open a restaurant here, nor was he going to open it to the public. Where could he find so many guests? After parking the car, the two walked into the room. As soon as they walked in, Jiang Hai couldn't help but nod his head secretly. Fortunately, Robbins did not mess around inside. The design of this villa was still according to the design that Jiang Hai originally said. In the middle of the hall, there was a large chandelier hanging above. The floor was still covered with a layer of carpet. The sofa in the middle, the wine cabinet next to it, the clothes rack, and so on were all designed according to Jiang Hai's original design. After all, this was the West. It was normal to be more Western style. Otherwise, if it was too Chinese, there would be some sense of inconsistency. As for Chinese, there were more small carvings or decorations. Looking at the living room, kitchen, bathroom, and the room on the second floor, Jiang Hai breathed a sigh of relief. In general, he was very satisfied with these places. As for the teaching building outside, the teaching building is the teaching building. It has already been built. What else can I say? After confirming that he was satisfied with this place, Robbins also smiled. It was a very happy thing for him to be able to help his boss with something. He went back to prepare food at once. After all, Jiang Hai's place had just become livable. There was nothing to eat. He estimated that in the next few days, Jiang Hai's dinner would need his help. But fortunately, Jiang Hai was not a stingy person. Before he left, he also thought about this problem. So before he left, he gave Robbins 4 weeks' salary. There was almost no monthly salary in the United States. Everyone paid attention to weekly salary and annual salary. Robbins and Jiang Hai agreed that the weekly salary was $800. This was also signed in the contract. 4 weeks' salary was $3,200, but Jiang Hai gave him $4,000. The extra $800 was for his meals after he came back. After Robbins left, Jiang Hai also looked at his room. In fact, his room was like a small home in the whole villa. In addition to his master bedroom, there were 2 small rooms in the whole house. At this time, the master bedroom was already decorated. In addition to the big bed that could not be moved, there was a TV opposite the bed. It was a TV that he specially bought because this TV did not seem to have a screen. Instead, it was a big table. This was the latest laser TV, also known as a screen TV. It could directly project 2D or 3D image effects without the need of glasses. It was 100 inches in size. Just this TV alone cost $10,000. In the whole villa, only this TV was like this. In addition to the TV, there was also a computer table on the other side of the bed. However, there was no computer on it now, so Jiang Hai had to set it up himself. The internet and other things had already been set up. There was also an internal phone at the head of the bed. He could use this phone to call anyone in the villa. Of course, these people could also call over. In addition, the wardrobe next to him, wallpaper on the wall, tapestries, and so on could be said to be complete in the room. There was even a small refrigerator in the corner for drinks. In addition to the master bedroom, the two small bedrooms were also decorated. There was a bed, a cabinet, a TV, internet, and so on. Everything was available. Although the living room outside was much smaller than the big living room downstairs, the price of the decoration was not low. There was a 70-inch TV in the living room so that people could watch it during normal times. The toilet bowl and bathtub in the bathroom were all replaced with new ones. They were all European brands. It could be said that Jiang Hai's room at this time was not even as luxurious as the presidential suite in a 5-star hotel. Even when Jiang Hai saw it himself, he felt that it was a waste for him to live in such a house. But in any case, this was his home now. There was nothing to say. Walking and looking all the way, even Jiang Hai himself felt that he was a bit of a country bumpkin. But to be honest, he was really satisfied with the decoration inside. It seemed that Robbins had done some small mistakes outside, but the inside was really strict. Robbins did not give the other party any opportunity to deal with him. Just as Jiang Hai was patrolling his territory with satisfaction, the phone at his head of the bed rang. When he picked it up, it was Robbins who called him because dinner was ready. He called Jiang Hai to eat. Going downstairs, he came to Robbins' small villa. Robbins' dinner tonight was also very rich. In addition to the unchanged steak and fish, there was also a large pot of thick soup. Boston was originally part of England's territory. It was also called the New England area, so the food here was basically related to the United Kingdom. The food in the United Kingdom was basically potatoes, 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 grilled fish, and fried chicken. Even after 100 years, Boston's food still did not make much progress. However, it was said that those who lived on the mountain lived on the mountain, and those who lived on the sea lived on the sea. Because of the cattle here, in addition to grilled fish, there was also grilled steak. And it was easy to eat dry food all the time, so there was a kind of thick soup called cheddar. The main ingredient in it was still potatoes, but some other vegetables could be added, and some clams from the sea could be added. The taste was fresh and sweet, and it was very good. If Jiang Hai were to eat this all day long, he might not be able to withstand it. But for the time being, it would be very good. Especially the beef. He felt that even if he were to eat this level of steak every day, he wouldn't get tired of it in a month. Because he originally liked to eat beef, and the beef here was indeed delicious. Needless to say, Jiang Hai was quite satisfied with the meal. After eating, Luo Binsi also took out a list of things to eat. "Boss, it's almost late autumn now. If we don't buy cattle now, it will be too late. But before buying cattle, we need to recruit some cowboys first. Which day do you think is suitable?" Robbins looked at Jiang Hai, pointed to the first thing they needed to do and asked softly. "Someone was getting married today, so I went to attend the wedding. The wedding here was different from the one in Bing City. Here, we need to eat 2 meals and have a day of fun. That's why I just came back. Now, I am releasing 2 chapters consecutively." Chapter 17. In the United States, the size and prosperity of a city were not based on the size and population of the city. This could be seen from watching NBA games. Phoenix, where the Phoenix Suns were based, was the 6th most populous city in the United States, but it was not a big city. San Antonio, where the Spurs were based, was ranked 9th. It was also not a big city. Instead, it was one of the representatives of a small city. Detroit was ranked 10th, Indianapolis was ranked 12th, Seattle was ranked 21st, Denver was ranked 22nd, and so on. These places were not considered big cities. They were just big cities. Big cities had to be counted according to metropolitan areas. In the United States, there were a total of 10 places that could be considered a metropolitan area. The largest was naturally New York. The entire state of New York, where the Big Apple was located, plus Long Island and northern New Jersey, were all within the scope of the New York metropolitan area. Next were the metropolitan areas of Los Angeles, Long Beach, and Santa Ana, with Los Angeles as the center. Chicago, Reaper, Joliet, Washington, plus Arlington and Alexandria. Houston, Sugar City, Baton metropolitan areas, Dallas, Fort Worth, Arlington metropolitan areas, Philadelphia, Camden, Wilmington metropolitan areas, San Francisco, Oakland, Fremont metropolitan areas, Atlanta, Sandy Springs, Marietta metropolitan areas, and finally, Boston, Cambridge, and Quincy metropolitan areas. In fact, speaking of Boston, the real city of Boston was very small. Its territory was probably the smallest among all the big cities. After all, this city was built by European colonists when they first arrived in the United States. From the perspective of the past, Boston was built well. However, from the perspective of the present, the buildings in Boston were really short and small. The roads were also very crowded. Traffic jams were not rare in Boston. Sometimes, it was even more congested than in the imperial capital. Such things were not very common in the United States. Perhaps everyone wanted to give Boston some face, so the surrounding areas of Boston such as Winthrop, Revere, Chelsea, Avery, Somerville, Cambridge, Watertown, Newton, Brookland, Needham, Dedham, Canton, Milton, and Quincy were all considered part of Greater Boston. In other words, they were like the districts of Huaxia cities now. The real city was only a little bit in the city center. Other than the city, the other districts were added later. Therefore, these county-level places were added later. Winthrop, where Jiang Hai lived now, was such an existence. It was called Boston, but strictly speaking, it was not Boston. What if it was not Boston? It was also considered Boston. Everyone had their own opinions. After confirming the first thing to do, Jiang Hai and his first and only subordinate, Robbins Garcia, walked around the manor the next day. They counted the things that could be used now and the things that were still missing. At present, the things in the manor were not many, but they were not few either. There were a total of 4 all-terrain vehicles, which were 4-wheeled motorcycles. These motorcycles were bought nearly 10 years ago. They were the kind that had no protection outside and were very dangerous. Moreover, they could still be ridden now. This was also a small miracle. When Jiang Hai wanted to buy a car in the future, these things were indispensable. He learned that such all-terrain vehicles, with the current price of new cars, were not too bad, and would cost $20,000 to $30,000. This was talking about dollars. In the United States, you couldn't spend dollars even if you spent dollars, right? In addition to these 4 all-terrain vehicles, there was a straw cutter that could still be used at the moment. However, it needed to be repaired properly and replaced with some parts. However, in Jiang Hai's opinion, it was better to just replace it. As for the other large vehicles, there was a large tractor used for farming. This was left behind by the previous tycoon. Its purpose was to level the land and use it for sowing. When he first bought this manor, it was not purely for fun. He also considered planting wheat and vegetables if the market for beef was not good. Unfortunately, he went bankrupt before he could plant them. Therefore, although this thing was bought 10 years ago, it was still relatively new and did not need to be replaced for the time being. The other cow sheds and horse sheds were built very sturdily. This time, when the villa was being renovated, Louis also asked the workers to use the leftover materials to reinforce these 2 places. Now, they only needed some people to come over and clean and repair them. As for fishing, Robbins did not know much about it. As for Jiang Hai, he took advantage of the afternoon break to go to the sea. He could breathe freely underwater, so naturally, he did not have to worry about this. However, he did not dare to go too far. After all, there were many dangers underwater. Not to mention those sharks, killer whales, and the like, just some poisonous jellyfish, sea snakes, and the like were enough to make him suffer. Jiang Hai did not know if his current tattoos were useful to these guys, but at least, he felt that he had almost no chance of winning underwater against a shark that was a few meters long. Unless his level was higher, it would be possible. Therefore, he did not swim too far. However, after going into the water, Jiang Hai was still very gratified. His fishing ground was a private fishing ground. In the past 7 years, it belonged to the world's third largest auction house. This auction house had nothing else but a lot of lawyers, and they were very narrow-minded. Therefore, over the years, the natural environment in Jiang Hai's fishing ground was extremely well protected. All of a sudden, Jiang Hai saw a lot of corals nearby. Although they were not connected into a large area, it was still a very good scene. It seemed that there was no need to plant corals in the future. It just needed to be protected. Among the coral reefs, there were many fish swimming around. In Jiang Hai's eyes, there were many fish that he recognized, such as the cod that Robbins always cooked for him at night. This cod was different from the ones in China. The fish in the Atlantic Ocean were originally bigger than the fish in the Pacific Ocean. Especially in this place that had been protected for 7 years, there were thousands of Atlantic cod in Jiang Hai's eyes. They were divided into several groups that swam back and forth in the middle and upper levels of the ocean. The largest one was even nearly 2 meters long, which was really amazing. In addition to the big cod, there were many herring here. This fish was also an economic fish, but it was much smaller. There was only one cartilage on its body. Europeans liked to eat this thing very much, and it was also very popular in the United States. In addition to these fish, there were many saltwater fish. On the beach below, there were many flounders, flatfish. In the middle and upper levels, there were many sea bass, barracuda, sea spun, and stonefish. These things were called yellow croakers, but their skin was not yellow, but red. They were called red stonefish, also known as channel bass. There were also gray stonefish, black stonefish, and all of them could be found here. In addition, there were many saltwater fish, grouper, bream, and in some places offshore, there were some migratory fish. For example, there were chum, Pacific salmon, which was the legendary three-striped fish, and so on. However, what really caught Jiang Hai's attention were not these, but the sea cucumbers, sea crabs, and lobsters on the seabed. When Jiang Hai came, he checked that the lobsters in Boston were known as the best in the world. The lobsters here were called Boston lobsters, also known as Maine lobsters. The taste was quite good, but Jiang Hai had never eaten it. Just as he was about to catch two to satisfy his craving, his body couldn't help but stop. With these sea creatures, there were naturally creatures that preyed on them. For example, sharks. What Jiang Hai saw now was a shark about 3 meters long. He didn't know what type it was, but he was scared and swam up. Although he returned empty-handed, he was quite happy at this time. He didn't have to worry about food and drink this time. After happily returning to the villa and walking around, Jiang Hai sat in Robin's old pickup truck and went to Winthrop. If he wanted to hire someone, it was naturally useless to post a notice here. He had to go to the town to find it. Winthrop was located in the easternmost part of Boston, separated by General Edward Lawrence Logan International Airport. Because it was a little far away, and mainly people who ran various family farms here, the town was not big. Those who worked in Boston preferred to live nearby, such as Chelsea, Cambridge, Somerville, and so on. If such a terrain was in the West, it might be good to have a few thousand people in the town, but after all, it was in the east of Europe. The towns in the east had a characteristic. There were more people than in the West. Along the way, Robbins also introduced Winthrop to Jiang Hai. This town had a total of nearly 30,000 people. It was a small town. In the town, everything was very complete. There were dozens of large supermarkets, car dealerships, gun shops, boat yards. Almost everything that Jiang Hai wanted to buy could be bought here. He didn't have to go to Boston to buy it. As Robin spoke, he took Jiang Hai to the front of a bar called Cowboy Song. "Okay, boss, it's time to get off." After parking the car, Robin said to Jiang Hai with a smile. "Okay." With that, Jiang Hai jumped out of the pickup truck and looked at the bar in front of him. This bar looked old. The whole bar had only one floor. The whole structure was made of wood. In the middle of the door, there was a sign made of wood. The sign had been smoked black. If it weren't for the colorful lights around, Jiang Hai couldn't see what was written on it. But because of the colorful lights, the bar looked more dilapidated. Today's second update will be delivered on time. Please support it, collect it, and recommend it. I'm counting on you. Chapter 18. Hey, let's go. Old Tony is a good person. He will like you, boss. At this time, Robinsi also parked the car and jumped out of his old car. He patted Jiang Hai on the shoulder and said with a smile, "I hope so." Looking at Robinsi's smile, Jiang Hai also smiled. In fact, he was not worried. After all, he was no longer the same as before. On land, he had the physical fitness of a human. This meant that 10 or 8 people were no match for him. Most importantly, he could breathe underwater. It could be said that as long as he wasn't poisoned, ordinary people wouldn't be able to catch him if he wanted to leave. This was also the reason why he dared to trust Luo Binsi after signing the contract with him. It was really because he was skilled and daring. Fortunately, Robinsi did not give Jiang Hai the opportunity to use the physical fitness of a human. Following Robinsi, the two walked into this bar called Cowboy Song. As soon as he walked in, Jiang Hai smelled alcohol mixed with inferior cigarettes, which made Jiang Hai frown. Jiang Hai did not smoke because he lived in Bing City. The winter in Bing City was too cold, and his family's trachea was not very good. So when he was in school, he learned to smoke for 2 years. But when winter came, it was too uncomfortable, so he quit in a year. Except for people who had a good relationship with him, almost no one knew that he smoked. Smoking was like this. If you had not smoked for a long time and suddenly smelled the smoke, it would be fine. But if you smoked and quit, you would not be able to stand the smell of smoke again. Jiang Hai was the same. Fortunately, the physical fitness of a human allowed him to quickly adapt to the smell here and walked in with Robinsi. "Hi, Robin, you haven't been here for a while. I heard that the green forest was sold. Are you looking for a job?" Looking at Luo Binsi and Jiang Hai, a middle-aged man wearing an apron walked over from a distance with a smile. This middle-aged man looked to be in his 50s or 60s. His hair was also gray. There was a layer of oil stains on his apron and he wore old clothes. He was about 1.8 meters tall, not much shorter than Jiang Hai, but his belly could fit Jiang Hai. "Hey, old Tony, I'm not here to look for a job, but to give them a job. Let me introduce you, this is my boss, the rich man from the east who bought the green forest." Hearing the uncle's words, Robin said to the man in front of him with a smile, "Oh. Is this the person who bought the green forest? What a surprise, young man. I thought that the one who bought green forest would be an old man in his 60s or 70s who was about to retire. Huh, nice to meet you." Hearing Robin's words, the old Tony in front of him smiled and smoothed things over and shook hands with Jiang Hai. "Hello, Jiang Hai, you can call me Jiang, or you can call me Hai." Shaking old Tony's hand, Jiang Hai said with a smile, "Boss, you sit over there first, I'll see if those good men are here." Seeing that Jiang Hai and old Tony had already known each other, Robbins also said something and then walked into the crowd. As for Jiang Hai, he followed old Tony to a table and ordered a cup of Long Island iced tea. He sat there and looked at the bar. The bar wasn't big, but it wasn't small either. The first floor was about 1,000 square meters, and it was divided into 4 parts. In the left corner, there were 3 billiard tables. At this time, many men and women were playing billiards there. On the other side of the billiard tables, there are several darts, and several young people are playing with them. In addition to the entertainment part, it is the main business part. It is about 600 square meters of space. There are many small tables like the one Jiang Hai is sitting at. At this time, many people are talking and laughing here. On the table in the middle, 2 big men are arm wrestling there. There is a stack of money next to them, but the amount is not much. Most of them are $1 bills. It seems that they are also gambling. On the other side is the bar. In front of the bar, there is a row of chairs, and many people are sitting on them. There is a huge wine cabinet inside. A bartender is playing tricks there. There is a huge TV beside him. At this time, the TV is broadcasting a football game. Some cowboys are sitting there and watching attentively. In the United States, there are 4 major leagues: baseball, ice hockey, football, and basketball. At present, football is also developing, but it is still a long way to go before these 4 major leagues. Boston is a strong sports city. There are teams in these 5 leagues, and they are all traditional powerhouses. Everyone should be most familiar with the Boston Celtics. They are 17 NBA champions, 21 Eastern Division champions, and 20 Atlantic Division champions. They are worthy of being the number 1 team in the NBA. But to be honest, the status of basketball in the United States is not high. It is only a little better than football, similar to ice hockey. Football and baseball have always crushed basketball. What's more, Boston's football and baseball teams are also worthy of being giants. Baseball's Boston Red Sox, 12 American League champions, and 7 World Series champions. Football's New England Patriots, 3 Super Bowl champions, and 6 division champions. Even the ice hockey's Boston Bruins have 6 Stanley Cup champions and 16 division champions. So, this is a well-deserved sports city. Now it is the regular season of the NFL. There is a round every week. Now it is a civil war in the Eastern Conference, the New England Patriots against the Buffalo Bills. Although Jiang Hai doesn't know much about these stars and doesn't usually watch the NFL, he used to watch a cartoon called Lightspeed Masked Man, so he has some understanding of football. As for offense, defense, scoring, shooting, and so on, he still knows, so he watches with great interest. Indeed, football is almost similar to fighting: clanging, 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 clanging. It makes people warm up. What? Jiang, are you also interested in football? At this time, old Tony came in front of Jiang Hai with a cup of Long Island iced tea and said with a smile, "It's okay, I don't even know all the people. NBA is more popular in our country." Taking the Long Island iced tea from old Tony, Jiang Hai said with a smile. When he heard Jiang Hai's words, old Tony sighed. "I was originally a Celtics fan, but now they are too disappointing, aren't they? I can understand trading away Kevin, Garnett, and Ray Allen, but trading away Paul Pierce, my heart is broken. He is the symbol of the team. Do you want me to watch him lead the other stages of the team to win against us? I really don't know what Angie is thinking in his head." When it comes to basketball, old Tony can't help but talk about it. When he heard his words, Jiang Hai just smiled. Everyone knew that China's home team had always been the Rockets. Although Jiang Hai's preference was different from others, he still preferred the teams in the Western Conference. To Jiang Hai, his favorite team was the San Antonio Spurs. To the current Spurs, playing with people was more fun than playing basketball. The only thing that could beat them was their hands on the ball. There was nothing else that could beat them other than their hands. "Hey, it looks like you guys are chatting happily." At this moment, Luo Binsi's voice came from afar. Jiang Hai looked back and saw Luo Binsi walking over with a few people. These people were basically all men. One of them looked to be in his 40s and had a beard that was not too long. He looked very handsome and had a sense of vicissitudes. He looked more like a Hollywood star than a cowboy. There is another man, about 40 years old. He is a black man. To be honest, it is really difficult for Jiang Hai to judge a black man's age. This is because they look like 40 when they are in their teens, 40 when they are in their 40s, and 40 when they are in their 50s. If they don't have hair, it is difficult to judge their real age. In addition to these two people, there are 4 people who look young. They are probably in their 30s or younger. One of them has a face full of confidence. He is wearing a denim outfit that is smooth. At first glance, Jiang Hai felt that he is a little too exaggerated. Beside him, there is another person who is about the same age as him, but he is more restrained. He just walks forward slowly. Behind the two of them, there were 2 more people. One of them looked a little dull, but he was more than 2 meters tall. He had a beard on his mouth, but his clothes were a little dirty. Finally, there was another person who didn't speak at all. He just walked quietly at the back. "Oh, you really brought a few good guys. Well, I will go to work first. I hope you can find the people you need." Looking at these people, old Tony chuckled. This Robbins was very famous in this area. If he wanted to recommend a job, the people who came were very powerful. At the very least, it would depend on Jiang Hai's requirements to decide who he wanted. "Hey, brother, I heard that you want to recruit people?" As soon as old Tony left, Robbins was about to introduce these people, but before he could even open his mouth, the man dressed like a dog asked with a smile on his face. "Shut up." Hearing his words, Jiang Hai frowned. Although he is not a rigid person, he doesn't like people who are too friendly. Moreover, this guy's frivolous face made Jiang Hai dislike him very much. Maybe he saw Jiang Hai's frown. The person who came with him also said coldly. Hearing this person's words, the guy couldn't help but shut his mouth, but he still looked at Jiang Hai with a proud face, as if Jiang Hai wants him. "Let me introduce you. This is Burke Dollar, one of our best cowboys. He has been herding for 20 years and was once the champion of 3 Texas sheep snatching competitions. To be honest, I may not be as good as him in horsemanship." Seeing Jiang Hai's gaze, Luo Binsi also formally began to introduce. He first introduced the white man beside him. Today's first update, 8 p.m. second update. Please support Little Faye, thank you. You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.